Chapter 1480. The Five-Dimensional Universe. After returning to the five-dimensional universe, Zhou Xian immediately called Bai Dizzy. In the hall, Bai Dizzy looked at the storage ring in Zhou Xian's hand with a solemn expression. These treasures. Zhou Xian smiled. Shocked, right? Bai Dizzy nodded. Zhou Xian said softly, I'm shocked too. As he said that, he told them about the mysterious woman. After listening to Zhou Xian's words, Bai Dizzy immediately shook his head. This woman's purpose is not pure. Zhou Xian asked, why do you think so? Bai Dizzy said in a deep voice, she may really be related to you, but if it was for your own good, she would never force you to absorb those souls. Moreover, don't you think her appearance is a bit too coincidental? Zhou Xian nodded and said in a deep voice, I think so too. However, with her strength it should be easy for her to kill me. If she wanted to deal with me, there is really no need for her to do these fancy things. Bai Dizzy shook his head. You can't think like that. Zhou Xian looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy said in a deep voice, it's easy to kill you, but what about after killing you? Can she live? As he said that, he shook his head. After the other party kills you, she definitely can't live. At least she will be retaliated. Zhou Xian shook his head. He really couldn't figure out the woman's purpose. Bai Dizzy said again, however, I also don't quite understand the other party's purpose. Because since the other party knows how powerful the woman in the plain dress is, but still dared to deal with you like this, it is definitely not normal. In any case, you have to be careful. Zhou Xian nodded. He was most worried about the mysterious enemy that the third young lady mentioned. If the previous aunt was the mysterious enemy that the third young lady mentioned, then it would be a bit of a pain in the ass. Bai Dizzy suddenly said, right? Miss N and Miss Xiaoqi have reached the Consolidation Realm. Consolidation Realm. Zhou Xian was stunned and then he said, that fast? Bai Dizzy smiled and said, it's mainly because of Xian City's help. Of course, the main reason is that Miss N and Miss Xiaoqi are too talented. Zhou Xian nodded. Xiaoqi and Xianxia's talent was definitely not inferior to his. Bai Dizzy continued, other than the two of them, Jialo, Arrow and Lady Jiao are also showing signs of breaking through. Zhou Xian suddenly asked, where are Mu and the others? Bai Dizzy said, you mean High Priest Mu of the Wu clan? Zhou Xian nodded. Of course, he did not forget this woman. He was her servant. Bai Dizzy said, the Wu clan has always been our focus. As for Miss Mu, she has already reached the Dao Attainment Realm. However, it will be a little difficult for her to reach the Consolidation Realm. Of course, Miss Mu's strength is not cultivation talent, but her intelligence. I have formed a cabinet which is filled with some outstanding people in our fifth dimension. Miss Mu is one of them. Many of the policies were proposed by Miss Mu. Zhou Xian smiled slightly. I'll go see her. Bai Dizzy nodded. Zhou Xian left the hall and went to the hall where Bai Dizzy worked, which was the Taoist temple. This Taoist temple was where Bai Dizzy usually worked. At this time, a group of people were busy in the temple. There were men and women, and there were more than 50 people. They were all people that Bai Dizzy had carefully selected. These people might not be very strong, but their intelligence was top-notch. Could be said that these people were the brains of the fifth dimension. When Zhou Xian walked into the hall, everyone in the hall raised their heads to look at Zhou Xian. When they saw that it was Zhou Xian, they immediately stopped what they were doing and stood up to greet him. Zhou Xian smiled slightly. You guys continue with your work. As he said this, he looked at a woman in the corner and smiled. My high priest, shall we go out for a walk? Mu looked at Zhou Xian. After a while she smiled sweetly. The two left the hall. Zhou Xian, this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. He brought Mu to the city. At this time Dao City was very prosperous. The streets were filled with people and the majority of them were cultivators. Moreover, they were very strong. This was because there were two attractive places in Dao City. First, there were complete versions of Dao scriptures. Second, the headquarters of the Fifth Dimension Academy was located here. All the major powers in the universe wanted to send their people to the Fifth Dimension Academy. This included the ancient superpowers like the Nanyue family and the Gu family. This was because the temptation of Dao scriptures was too great. Although they had obtained some of the contents of Dao scriptures, their cultivation methods and martial arts were still in the hands of Zhou Xian. As for the whirling school, although they also had it, they didn't dare to spread it. Therefore, if one wanted to learn Dao scriptures, martial arts and Dao scriptures, There were only two places. One was the fifth dimension and the other was the Dao sect. However, Dao Gate was not open to the public. Therefore they could only come to the fifth dimension. At this time Amu suddenly said in a soft voice, "I thought you had forgotten about me." Xian collected his thoughts and smiled. "How could I forget about you? Even if I forget about myself, I will not forget about you." Amu turned her head and looked at Xian. A moment later, her expression became somewhat complicated. "You have grown so fast." Xian turned his head to look at Amu and smiled. "No matter how fast I grow, I will always be your witch's servant." Amu stopped and looked at Xian. "Are you still my witch's servant?" Xian looked straight at Amu. "I will be your witch's servant for a lifetime. Not only your witch's servant, but also the Wu clan's witch's servant." Amu looked at Xian for a long time. After a long time she suddenly pulled Xian's hand and smiled. "You must remember what you said." Xian held Amu's hand. "I never lied to my own people." The corner of Amu's mouth rose. "The witch's servant I found is the strongest in the history of the Wu clan." Xian laughed. Amu suddenly said softly, "Meeting you and choosing you is my fortune and also the Wu clan's fortune." Xian shook his head. "Meeting you is my fortune." Amu smiled mischievously. "Do you really think so?" Xian smiled. "I told you. I never lied to my own people." Amu blinked. "I'm one of your own people?" Xian nodded. "Yes." Amu smiled. "Thank you. Actually, at first I really thought you had forgotten about me. I didn't dare to look for you because I was afraid you would really forget about me. I just didn't expect you to take the initiative to look for me." Xian said softly, "I'm sorry." Amu shook her head. "I know you are very busy. Moreover, the enemies are getting stronger and stronger." As she said that, she looked at Xian. "Do we still have powerful enemies?" Xian nodded. "Yes." Amu sighed softly. "When will it end?" Xian smiled. "It's fine. I'll carry it." As he said that, he pulled Amu to the noodle shop. He looked at the owner of the noodle shop and said with a smile, "Boss, 2 bowls of noodles." The owner laughed. "Sir, please wait a moment. I'll be right there." As Xian and Amu took their seats, many people around them looked over mainly at Amu. Amu was a great beauty. Coupled with her gentle personality, she gave people a very comfortable feeling. Soon 2 bowls of noodles were served. Xian looked at Amu and said with a smile, "I especially like eating noodles." Amu blinked. "Were you poor when you were young?" Xian smiled. "You investigated me?" Amu nodded. Xian looked at the noodles in front of him. At that moment he thought of Yiling again. He did not know how that little girl was doing now. However, with that mysterious senior around, Yiling's safety would definitely not be a problem. At that moment laughter suddenly came from the side. "What a beautiful woman." Hearing that, Xian frowned slightly. He turned his head and saw a young man walking over slowly from afar. The man was wearing a purple brocade robe. If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. There was a piece of green jade tied to his waist. The jade was the size of a palm and emitted a dark green glow. It was obvious that it was no ordinary item. And in his right hand he held a long sword. The man was handsome and dressed luxuriously. The moment he appeared, he attracted the attention of many people, especially women. Many women around looked at the man with smiles on their faces and covered their mouths as they whispered. Actually, the man's looks were secondary. The most important thing was that the man was carrying a sword. One look and you could tell that he was a swordsman. It should be known that the most popular person in the entire 5th dimension was a swordsman. This was because the master of the 5th dimension, who was also the dean of the 5th dimension academy, Xian, was a swordsman. Behind the young man there was an old man. The old man carried a sword and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. One look and you could tell that he was an expert. The man slowly walked to the side of Xian and Amu. He looked at Amu and smiled. "Miss, there is still an empty seat here. May I sit here?" Amu looked at a certain badge on the man's chest. She smiled and shook her head. "It's not convenient." The man was not angry. He smiled and said, "Miss, let me introduce myself. I am Nam Muchuan." Nam Muchuan. As soon as the man's voice fell, there was a cry of surprise. "Oh my God. He's that Nam Muchuan. It's really him. He's Nam Muchuan from the number 1 family in the south, the Nanmo family. The #1 swordsman of the south, Nanmu Chuan. I heard that his overall score reached 9 stars. 9 stars. So he's here to join the 5th Dimension Academy's headquarters? That's for sure. 5th Dimension Academy. In front of Amu, Yi Xian blinked his eyes and looked at Nanmu Chuan. You're from the 5th Dimension Academy? Nanmu Chuan looked at Yi Xian. Let me correct you. I'm currently from the 5th Dimension Academy's headquarters. Yi Xian pointed at himself. He was a little puzzled. You don't know me? Nanmu Chuan smiled. Should I know you? Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. Amu covered her mouth and chuckled. She used her mystical qi to transmit her voice. Every academy has a statue of you and Miss Nian Nian. However, that statue is a little exaggerated. In addition, you're wearing 2 ordinary clothes. Moreover, your aura is restrained and you don't have the aura of a ruler. Therefore, it's normal that he doesn't know you. In fact, it's not just them. Many people in the city don't really know you. Because you spend very little time in the city, people rarely come into contact with you. Even if they see you, they won't think of you immediately. Yi Xian was speechless. He was too low-key. At this time, Nanmu Chuan looked at Amu. How should I address you, miss? Amu smiled. She pointed at Yi Xian. Do you know who he is? Nanmu Chuan glanced at Yi Xian. He smiled. I don't know. I don't want to know either. Amu was a little curious. Why? Nanmu Chuan smiled. Miss, forgive me for being blunt. He's not worthy of you. Yi Xian lowered his head and ate his noodles. He didn't say anything. This was too tragic. His position as the master of the 5th dimension was really too tragic. It was fine if outsiders didn't know him. But no one in the city had noticed him. When he got back, he had to have a good talk with Bai Dizzy. Nanmu Chuan looked at Amu. Miss, do you really not want to get to know me? I feel that if you don't get to know me, first of all, I will feel very regretful. Second, I feel that this is a loss for you. Amu gently kicked Yi Xian. He was a little dissatisfied. My witch's servant, stop eating. Yi Xian wiped his mouth and looked at Nanmu Chuan. She's my high priestess and I'm her witch's servant. She won't get to know another man. Nanmu Chuan shook his head and smiled. He took out a storage ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. There are 100 fortune divine crystals inside. There's also a scroll of my sword Dao mental cultivation method and insights. It's enough to change your fate. Leave her and these are all yours. Yi Xian. End of this chapter. Chapter 1481. 100 fortune divine crystals. Yi Xian was speechless. Damn it, I still have a few 100 million in my storage ring. Amu covered her mouth and snickered. At this moment she did not look like a high priestess. Instead she looked like a young girl in love. When Nanmu Chuan saw that Yi Xian did not speak, he took out another storage ring. 200 fortune divine crystals. 200. Yi Xian was about to speak when Nanmu Chuan threw out another storage ring. 1,000 fortune divine crystals. 1,000. Someone exclaimed in surprise. 1,000 fortune divine crystals was not a small amount. One should know that the most common crystals in the market were ordinary crystals. Only some of the major forces had fortune divine crystals. There was another reason why many people racked their brains to enter the 5th Dimensions Academy. The Academy would provide them with fortune divine crystals. For an ordinary person, 1,000 fortune divine crystals was enough to change their fate. Yi Xian looked at Nanmu Chuan and smiled. So what if you're rich? Nanmu Chuan smiled. Being rich isn't necessarily a big deal. But without money one must be a coward. What do you think? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. You're right. Without money one must be a coward. But I don't understand. Didn't your academy teach you how to behave? First of all, it's rude of you to interrupt us while we're eating noodles. Secondly, you insulted me with money. That's very tasteless. I remember there's a rule in the academy. Disciples are not allowed to bully the weak or... Nanmu Chuan suddenly interrupted Yi Xian. I'm sorry. There's no such rule in the academy. Yi Xian looked at Nanmu Chuan. Then there's one now. I said it. Nanmu Chuan narrowed his eyes. He had already noticed that something was wrong. Amu was also silent. She knew that Yi Xian was a little angry. Bullying the weak was what Yi Xian hated the most. Simply put, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Nanmu Chuan looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, looks like you're not an ordinary person. However, aren't you a little too arrogant? Do you think you can change the academy's rules just because you say so? Yi Xian smiled and said, I think we should give people a chance to turn over a new leaf. Now apologize to both of us, sincerely apologize, and we will forgive you. What do you think? Nan Mutuan laughed. Sir, you think too highly of yourself. Yi Xian faintly smiled. Then I will now announce that you are disqualified from entering the Fifth Dimension's Academy. Nan Mutuan looked at Yi Xian and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Who the hell are you? He was not stupid. At this moment he already felt that something was wrong. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, a voice sounded out from the side. Brother Nanmu, this person sure is arrogant. Yi Xian turned his head and saw a man striding over from afar. Nan Mutuan was slightly surprised when he saw this person. Then he smiled and said, Oh, it's Brother Feng Jin. Feng Jin. Someone in the crowd exclaimed. He's also Feng Jin who passed the 9 Stars Academy. This time, there were only 2 people from the south who were admitted into the Fifth Dimension's Academy. One of them was Nan Mutuan and the other was Feng Jin. These 2 people belonged to the same academy in the south. Feng Jin cupped his fists at Nan Mutuan and then looked at Yi Xian. He smiled and said, Did you just say that you want to disqualify Nan Mutuan? Yi Xian smiled and said, Yes. Feng Jin shook his head and smiled. Don't you think it's ridiculous for you to say that? Yi Xian blinked his eyes. Is it ridiculous? Feng Jin laughed. It's not just ridiculous. As far as I know, there are only 2 people who can disqualify someone from the academy. One of them is Vice Dean Bai Dizzy and the other is Yi Xian. At this point he seemed to have thought of something. His pupils suddenly shrank and he took a few steps back. You? Yi Xian smiled. What about me? Feng Jin stared at Yi Xian. After a while he said in a trembling voice, Dean Yi. As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. At this time someone exclaimed, He's City Lord Yi. It's really him. He used to kill a fish seller here. Green City Yi Family Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The person who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man. The young man had a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. Beside him were the elders of the Yi family. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling. She was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the family wanted to disqualify Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you disqualify him? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to disqualify him or not. Men, drag her away. At this time the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The Great Elder replied coldly, Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 guards of the Yi family rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard smiled coldly. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yilang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. "I will go through fire and water for the crown prince. I will do anything for you." Yilang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time, Zhou Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt dizzy and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yilang suddenly roared, "Zhou Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. "Pooh." Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Zhou Xian ignored Zhang Mu. Walking up to Yiling, seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Zhou Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yilang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yilang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Zhou Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Zhou Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yiling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Zhou Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yiling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yiling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master, Yi Lang inherits the prince's position. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and his robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Zhou Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu's head spun and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 1482. Kill him. There was complete silence. Around them, some people secretly shook their heads. Was there something wrong with Nan Muchuan's brain? Facing Yi Xian, not only did he refuse to admit defeat, he even said such ruthless words. Did he really think that Yi Xian was a good-tempered person? Overturn the Fifth Dimension Academy? How stupid would he have to be to say such words? Yi Xian shook his head. He turned to look at Amu and smiled. "Let's go." Amu nodded. The two of them left. On the way, Amu said softly, "It's our fault. When we go back, I will strengthen the management of the various academies, especially the education on how to behave." Yi Xian shook his head. "It's my problem." Amu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "I seemed too easy to talk to at the beginning. He felt that I was weak. This world is like this. Some people have a good temper, but in the eyes of others, a good temper means that they are easy to bully. However, a good temper does not mean that they have no temper." As he said that, he shook his head. There are many people. They like to bully the weak and fear the strong. They like to bully the kind and honest because the kind and honest are easy to bully. There are also some people who like to use moral coercion. Just look at Nan Muchuan. He actually said that I am the headmaster and cannot kill him. Killing him would be breaking the law. It really amused me. This is like a mother of a naughty child. Her child has made a mistake. However, she does not educate her child. Instead, she educates you and questions you. He is still a child. How can you be so calculative with a child? Amu shook her head and smiled. Your analogy. Yi Xian smiled. It's not particularly appropriate, but you should understand what I mean. Amu nodded. She seemed to have thought of something. She hesitated and then said, "But you are the headmaster. This matter should not be handled personally. I am afraid that someone will use it." Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "Who dares?" Amu was silent. In the fifth dimension, no one dared to stab Yi Xian in the back. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Amu, what do you think they came to the headquarters for?" Amu said, "Learn." Yi Xian asked, "What else?" Amu was silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, "They are not only here to learn, but also to protect the five-dimensional universe." The fifth dimension. Was it Sister Nian's fifth dimension? Is this my Yi Xian's five-dimensional universe? No, the fifth dimension is everyone's fifth dimension. Anyone who lives in the fifth dimension has the obligation to protect our fifth dimension. The academy is not a safe place for them to enjoy. Yi Xian will not spend money to feed a bunch of conceited people. As he spoke, he looked at Amu. Remember, we're not doing charity. For some people, if you help them once, they will shed tears of gratitude. But if you help them 10 times, they will feel that it's only right. And if you don't help them anymore, they might even see you as an enemy. I'm telling you this because I realize that our academy lacks a core purpose. What is the purpose of entering the school? There's nothing wrong with learning. But what else? I don't ask them to serve me, Yi Xian, but they must serve this universe. Do you understand? Amu nodded. I understand. Yi Xian nodded. You can talk to Bai Dizzy about this. He will handle it. Amu smiled and said, "Old Bai is very busy. Let me handle this matter. I will come up with a plan first, then I will submit it to you. You can make the final decision." Yi Xian nodded. Amu smiled. "Come back for noodles next time." Yi Xian laughed. After chatting for a while, they parted ways. Yi Xian did not return to the sword hall directly. Instead, he went to the boundless dungeon. Tendo pawn shop. When Yi Xian came to the Tendo pawn shop, the door was open. There was a woman standing behind the counter inside the door. It was Xiao Dao. As if sensing something, Xiao Dao suddenly looked up. When she saw Yi Xian, she was slightly stunned. Yi Xian walked into the pawn shop and smiled. "They told me that you've been living here?" Xiao Dao nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian looked around and said softly, "I haven't been here for a long time." Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "You're very busy now." Yi Xian smiled. "I'm a little busy." Xiao Dao said softly, "When will Nian Nian regain her memory?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know." Xiao Dao was silent. Yi Xian was about to speak. At this moment, the space in front of him trembled slightly. Yi Xian frowned. Xiao Dao asked, "What's wrong?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Nian Nian is gone." "Gone?" The little Taoist was stunned for a moment before saying, "It disappeared?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm going back." After saying that, he disappeared. In the pawn shop, Xiao Dao was silent for a while before disappearing. Sword Hall. When Yi Xian returned to the Sword Hall, Bai Dizzy had been waiting there for a long time. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "You said that Nian Nian is gone?" Bai Dizzy nodded. "Not long ago she was wandering around the city, so I didn't pay much attention. But not long after, she disappeared." Yi Xian was silent. Bai Dizzy said in a deep voice, "Has she regained her memory?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know." Bai Dizzy was silent. Yi Xian said softly, "Have you sent anyone to look for her?" Bai Dizzy nodded. "But there's no news at all. Also, we don't know how she disappeared." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said softly, "There's no need to look for her." Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "I believe that she will come back." With that, he looked at Bai Dizzy. "As long as Sister Nian doesn't want anything to happen to her, she won't be in danger." Bai Dizzy smiled. "That's true." Then he looked at Yi Xian. "Today is the first day of school. As the dean, you should go." Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't really want to go." Bai Dizzy said, "Is it because of Nanmuchuan?" Yi Xian smiled. "You know about it too?" Bai Dizzy said, "As the most outstanding swordsman of the younger generation in the south, it's normal for him to be arrogant." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you think I did something wrong?" Bai Dizzy shook his head. "No. Through this matter, I discovered a problem. Many people in the fifth dimension respect you, but they don't fear you. If I were the one who appeared, that guy definitely wouldn't have threatened you. On the contrary, he would have immediately admitted his mistake and begged for mercy." Yi Xian smiled. "What's the problem?" Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. The reason is that you're too young. Youngsters generally don't respect other youngsters. The students in the academy know you're strong, but no one knows how strong you are. Therefore many people don't fear you. Since they don't fear you, they naturally dare to provoke you. After all, they're proud sons of heaven, and these kinds of people usually don't submit to people of the same age. Therefore, it is necessary for you to attend the start of term ceremony. At the same time, I also hope that you can tell them that in this world, there are youngsters who are more outstanding than them. Let them know that there's always someone better than you. Yi Xian said with a smile, looks like I have to go. Bai Dizzy nodded. As the dean, you should go no matter what. Moreover, you should also show your strength. Let those guys know that you, the dean, aren't some kind of trash. Yi Xian laughed. Then let's go. Bai Dizzy nodded and the two of them left. With regards to Nian Nian, Yi Xian wasn't really worried because he knew how terrifying Nian Nian was. Fifth Dimensions Academy. Dao City was unusually lively today because today was the day students from all over the universe would come to Dao City to enroll. It was also the first time the Dao City's headquarters was recruiting students. And this time, those who came could be said to be monsters among monsters, geniuses among geniuses. It could be said that this time, all the monsters and geniuses of the fifth dimension would be gathered here, including some geniuses from ancient powers. For example, Nanyue Xiao and Nanyue Qi of the Nanyue clan. Not only the Nanyue clan, but there were also geniuses from the Gu clan and Xian City. Fifth Dimensions Academy. The Fifth Dimensions Academy was built on a large scale. There were more than 60 different learning halls. In addition, there were also formations arranged by the Xuanji sect. There were all kinds of formations, more than 100 of them. As for the lineup of teachers, it was also very luxurious. Arrow and Lanxiu and Li Shanshui of the Whirling sect were all teachers of the academy. They were all super experts at the peak of the fifth dimension. At the entrance of the academy there were two huge statues. One was of Nian Nian and the other was of Yi Xian. Nian Nian was the Tendo of the fifth dimension, the soul of the entire fifth dimension, while Yi Xian was the protector of the entire fifth dimension. As the entrance of the fifth dimension's academy opened, students entered the academy one after another. Somewhere in the darkness, Bai Dizzy smiled and said, Dao Master, what do you think of these students? Yi Xian looked at the students in the distance and said softly, very outstanding. Bai Dizzy nodded, this world doesn't lack monsters and geniuses. What it lacks is people who discover them. This time even I was shocked by the establishment of the academy. It turns out that there are so many monsters and geniuses in our cosmos. Originally, the academy only accepted 30 people every year, but I felt that it wasn't enough, so I expanded it to 40. Yi Xian said softly, these people are the future of the fifth dimension. Bai Dizzy nodded. The fifth dimension couldn't always be carried by Yi Xian. His intuition told him that in the future, Yi Xian would definitely go to a broader stage. At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, we need to let these guys have a sense of belonging to the fifth dimension. Bai Dizzy said with a smile, that's natural. Actually, everyone already has a sense of belonging to the fifth dimension. Let's not talk about other things. Many people in my Dao sect have already regarded themselves as members of the fifth dimension. Yi Xian said with a smile, that's a good thing. Bai Dizzy looked at the students in the distance and said with a smile, some of the branch vice deans told me to pay attention. Pay attention to what? Yi Xian was curious. Bai Dizzy said with a smile, there are many thorns in this batch of students. At this time a man suddenly rushed in from the distance. He was tall and sturdy, and with every step he took the ground would tremble violently. Not only the ground but the space he ran through would also tremble. Yi Xian looked at this man and there was some surprise in his eyes. Not bad. Bai Dizzy nodded. This guy is called Manzi. He is a body cultivator and he is the strongest among the body cultivators. Moreover, his overall score has reached 10 stars. Yi Xian was a little curious. What's the highest score? Bai Dizzy said 12 stars. This time among all the students only one person has reached 12 stars, and among them, there are only 6 11-star students. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this time, Manzi suddenly rushed in front of Yi Xian's statue. He looked straight at Yi Xian's statue and roared, Manzi of the great wilderness, I challenge Dean Yi. I seek a hammer. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1483. begging for a hammer. Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. Next to Yi Xian, Bai Dizzy smiled and said, "Look, they are not very convinced by you. However, you have to understand. After all, they are all geniuses. It is normal for them to have drive." Yi Xian nodded, "Of course." Bai Dizzy looked at Man Zi in the distance. "Everyone is waiting for you to appear." Yi Xian laughed, and the next moment he appeared directly in front of Man Zi. Seeing Yi Xian, there was an uproar in the field. Yi Xian appeared. The eyes of all the students around fell on Yi Xian. There was respect, curiosity, excitement, and provocation. Dean. Although Yi Xian was the dean, Yi Xian was the same age as them. In addition, Yi Xian's strength was mostly legendary. For example, Yi Xian had killed a consolidation realm expert and so on. Therefore, many people had always been skeptical about Yi Xian's strength. In other words, many people wanted to know how strong Yi Xian was. Seeing Yi Xian, the barbarian chuckled. "You're the dean." Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Man Zi glanced at Yi Xian. "Do you dare to accept my challenge?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I dare." Man Zi grinned and said, "Let me tell you, my fist has no eyes. If I hurt you later, don't blame me and don't make things difficult for me." Yi Xian was directly amused by this guy. It turned out that this guy was afraid that he would make things difficult for him. Man Zi asked again, "Is there a problem?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely not make things difficult for you." Man Zi grinned, "Then I won't be polite." As his voice fell, he suddenly rushed forward. With this rush, the space in front of Yi Xian directly turned into a groove. His physical strength was too strong. When he arrived in front of Yi Xian, the barbarian directly threw a punch at Yi Xian's head. It was a simple punch. However, this punch contained a powerful and overbearing force. With a single punch, the space around Yi Xian directly cracked. Needless to say, Yi Xian was still a little shocked. This punch was definitely not something an average Dao accomplished realm powerhouse could resist. And how old was this barbarian? To have such great power at such a young age, one had to say that it was very terrifying. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian punched out. Boom. Under everyone's gazes, the barbarian was sent flying out of the academy before crashing heavily onto the ground. Bang. The ground collapsed and the barbarian's body trembled. The surroundings fell silent. One punch. Many of the students present turned solemn. Right at this moment, the barbarian slowly crawled up from the ground, and his entire body had cracked apart. Yi Xian walked over to him and the barbarian hurriedly said, "No. No more." "I can't." Yi Xian smiled, "I'm not going to hit you." As he spoke, he withdrew a medicinal pill and passed it to Man Zi. "It's for healing." Man Zi glanced at Yi Xian, hesitated for a moment, and then took the medicinal pill and consumed it. As soon as the medicinal pill entered his body, a strand of pure energy swept out from within him, and it didn't take long for his injuries to heal at a visible speed. Man Zi was slightly shocked. "This." Yi Xian smiled, "Your physical body isn't bad and your strength isn't bad as well. However, there's still a lot of room for growth." Man Zi hurriedly stood up and bowed respectfully. Pine City, the Yi clan's ancestral shrine. Ancestors, Yi Xian is lacking in talent and virtue. From this moment onward, Yi Xian is removed from the position of heir and will be succeeded by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile hanging on the corners of his mouth. This person was Yi Lang. And on both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly resounded in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine, and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a heir. Why did you remove him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a clan matter, why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look directly at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she summoned her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. She bowed again to the elders on both sides, Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and his life is uncertain. But the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the position of heir. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly said angrily, whether he is removed or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away from me. At this time the new heir Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder coldly said, then flog 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new heir Yilang, and he knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard smiled coldly. Young Master Yilang inherits the position of heir and it is everyone's wish. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Flap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the heir. Yilang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the heir I will need 10 guards. You will be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the heir, and I will risk my life for him. Yilang nodded. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Zhou Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak, when Zhou Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's expression turned ugly. Zhou Xian looked up at him and snarled, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's appearance, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian her tears flowed out. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Zhou Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yilang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yilang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Zhou Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Zhou Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, My brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However she did not cry. She only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 1484. Who was that mysterious person just now? Yi Xian was puzzled. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian got up and left. After a while he arrived at the Dao Gate. He was looking for third Miss. Dao Gate. As soon as Yi Xian arrived, an old man appeared in front of him. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and cupped his fists. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. I'm looking for third Mississippi. Please inform her. The old man smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi came at a bad time. Third Miss has just left. Yi Xian frowned. Left. The old man nodded. Yi Xian asked, Where did she go? The old man shook his head. She didn't say. Yi Xian fell silent. The old man said, Young Master Yi, do you want to go in and have a seat? Yi Xian smiled. Thank you. But there's no need. I still have something to deal with. Goodbye. With that said, he turned and left. After a moment of silence, the old man turned and left. It didn't take long for him to arrive in front of a large hall, within which sat a woman. It was Third Miss. The old man bowed slightly. Third Master, young Master Yi has left. Third Miss nodded slightly. Got it. The old man was puzzled. Third Master, why didn't you see young Master Yi? Third Miss felt helpless. Because I'm afraid of death. The old man was speechless. Third Miss got up and walked to the entrance of the hall. She looked up at the sky and said softly, I'm afraid that young Master Yi is in big trouble. After Yi Xian left the Taoist gate, his face became more and more serious. His intuition told him that Third Miss did not want to see him. But why did she not want to see him? It was simple. His enemy made Third Miss fearful, extremely fearful. Who was that enemy? Could it be that ant? A moment later, Yi Xian turned and left. He arrived at Xian City. In a certain hall, Lan Ruo shook his head. I didn't see them, so I don't know which faction they are from. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian stood up and said with a smile, Miss Lan Ruo, I'll take my leave first. Lan Ruo looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, take care. Yi Xian nodded. You too. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and transformed into a streak of sword light that vanished into the horizon. Inside the hall, Lan Ruo looked at the horizon in silence. Although Yi Xian no longer had his archenemy, Dao sect, she realized that Yi Xian seemed to be in more danger. There seemed to be an invisible hand secretly targeting Yi Xian. As for who it was, she didn't know either. However, she knew that it wasn't an ordinary mastermind. After a short moment, Lan Ruo sighed softly, turned around and left. After leaving the profound city, Yi Xian came to a starry sky and slowly closed his eyes. He was sure that he had a hidden enemy, and this enemy was very, very powerful. The sacred land. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment he thought of the sacred land. Dao sect was no longer his enemy, so there was only one place left. The sacred land, a mysterious force that even profound city couldn't infiltrate. As he thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a streak of sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at the sacred land. As soon as he entered the sacred land, the sacred leader of the sacred land appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing the sacred leader, Yi Xian's face darkened. He didn't come openly, he came sneakily. Of course he didn't come openly. Green City Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment onwards, Yi Xian's position as crown prince shall be removed and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her two little hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of timidity in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men drag her away. At this time the new crown prince Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder coldly replied, then do it 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yilang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yilang inherits the crown prince position. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yilang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the crown prince and I'll risk my life for you. Yilang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the killing intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Zhou Xian who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time Zhou Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Zhou Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yilang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yilang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Zhou Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Zhou Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Zhou Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yiling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is crippled, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then do it 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yilang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang sized up the guard and asked with a smile, what's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yilang nodded. You are very good. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. From now on you will be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. Subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince and I will risk my life for you. Yilang nodded slightly. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Zhou Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his expression changed. He hurriedly looked at Yilang and was about to speak, when Zhou Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's expression turned ugly, while Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's entire face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu who was crying for help as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 1485. He ran away. The sacred lord's expression was somewhat unsightly. He had thought that Zhou Xian would go down and fight. He did not expect Zhou Xian to turn around and run. A moment later the sacred lord turned and left. He came to the bamboo house. The sacred lord bowed slightly to the bamboo house. Master, Zhou Xian's growth is too fast. Inside the bamboo house, the woman put down the teacup and picked up an ancient book. She opened it and smiled. There's nothing bad about it. Nothing bad about it. The sacred lord was somewhat dumbfounded. The woman chuckled. He will become even stronger. The sacred lord hesitated and said, Master, aren't you worried? The woman turned and looked outside the bamboo house. She smiled. I told you. Whether he lives or not doesn't depend on him. Whether I die or not also doesn't depend on him. At least for the next 30 years. The sacred lord was silent. The woman put down the ancient book and walked out of the bamboo house. The sacred lord hurriedly bowed. The woman stretched and smiled. Miss Nian Nian, I haven't seen her for a long time. She must have gone to find help. Who would she call? Let me think. Missin has been following him. She probably won't come. Nether Hall? They are quite troublesome now. They probably won't come either. Then who else could it be? Yun? Probably not either. Both of them have been targeted by the calamity cause. Xianxia? Probably not. After all, her main body isn't here. Oh, the three-dimensional universe. Princess should be her. After all, she's the only one who can fight. Saying this, she seemed to have thought of something. The smile on her face gradually disappeared. Don't tell me she called that Miss Ding? If that's the case, then it'll be troublesome. At the side, the sacred lord bowed. He was puzzled. Why didn't he know any of the people his master mentioned? At this moment, the woman suddenly smiled and said, I'll go out and see if I can make more enemies for him. I'll also look for the great Tao spirit. During this period of time, don't provoke Lord Yi. It won't be long before someone comes to deal with him. After saying this, she walked into the distance. Soon she completely disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension. In the hall, Yi Xian sat on the ground with his legs crossed. At this moment, his expression was extremely solemn. Back in the sacred ground, when that divine sense locked onto him, he knew that he was no match for the owner of that divine sense. Who was this person? There was no answer. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment he felt a little uneasy. The enemy of the Holy Land was different from the Tao sect because he could not figure out their intentions. For the Tao scripture? However, the Tao scripture was no longer in his hands, and the spirit of the great Tao had already escaped. The other party had no reason to look for him. But if it wasn't for the Taoist scripture, then what was it for? Yi Xian couldn't figure it out. At this moment a little girl walked in. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the little girl. The person who had come was none other than Nian Nian. Nian Nian held a stick of tonghulu in her right hand and a struggling small fish in her left. Nian Nian walked in front of Yi Xian and giggled. Grilled fish. Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian. Nian Nian, where did you go before this? Nian Nian blinked. I've been playing outside all this time. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Playing outside? Nian Nian nodded. Yes. Yi Xian fell silent. Nian Nian didn't seem to be lying. Nian Nian suddenly asked softly, What's wrong? Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and shook his head. He smiled and said, It's nothing. I'll grill fish for you. Nian Nian grinned. Okay. Somewhere in the starry sky, a woman was walking slowly. This person was none other than Yi Ling. Yi Ling looked into the depths of the starry sky in the distance. We're almost there. As soon as she said that, her speed suddenly increased. Soon Yi Ling arrived at a small village. This village was a little strange because it was in the starry sky. Yi Ling walked into the village. The village was very deserted. The surrounding light was dim and it looked a little like a ghost village. At that moment an old man walked out. When he saw Yi Ling, the old man frowned slightly. You are. Yi Ling opened her palm and a faint light flickered in her palm. Seeing this, the old man was slightly taken aback. The next moment he knelt down and said in a trembling voice, Clan leader. Yi Ling nodded. Did he store my body here? The old man hurriedly nodded. Yes. After a long silence, Yi Ling said, Take me there. The old man hurriedly stood up and said in a trembling voice, Clan leader, follow me. With that he turned and left. At that moment the old man's face was already covered in tears. He was happy. They had waited for countless years and the clan leader had finally arrived. Yi Ling followed the old man. On the way, Yi Ling suddenly asked, How many clansmen are left? The old man shook his head. Not many. If it weren't for young Master Yang's care back then, I'm afraid. Yi Ling was silent. The Void Spirit clan had become history. Soon the two disappeared into the distance. Ultimate Martial Realm. Wu Li sat cross-legged on a mountain peak. He formed a seal with his hands and exuded a powerful aura. This aura was getting stronger and stronger, and it was no longer the aura that a godly state expert should have. Northern Wilderness. In the deepest part of Northern Wilderness, there was a huge stone tablet that was over 100 feet tall. The stone tablet stood in a deep pit. A few hundred feet away, a middle-aged man was walking toward the stone tablet. When he was about 100 feet away from the stone tablet, he suddenly knelt down, put his palms together and bowed to the stone tablet. He was even chanting something piously. After a while, the middle-aged man stood up and continued walking toward the stone tablet. After about 10 steps, he knelt down again. Just like that, the middle-aged man slowly approached the stone tablet, kneeling and bowing every 10 steps. After a long time, the middle-aged man came before the stone tablet. He knelt down in front of the stone tablet, put his palms together and said in a trembling voice, "Exalted goddess, Zhou Xian has gone too far. Not only did he absorb the souls of our clansmen, but he also took away all our treasures. Please help us, exalted goddess." The stone tablet did not respond. The middle-aged man bowed again. Just as he was about to speak, a woman suddenly appeared behind him. The middle-aged man turned around. When he saw the woman, his expression changed drastically. This woman was the mysterious woman who had robbed Northern Wilderness. The woman smiled. "You don't seem to want to see me." The middle-aged man quickly retreated behind the stone tablet. He stared at the mysterious woman. "What are you trying to do?" The mysterious woman blinked. "He said that he's afraid that you'll take revenge, so he wants me to kill all of you." The middle-aged man roared. "You've gone too far." The mysterious woman waved her right hand. Boom. The middle-aged man was sent flying a few hundred feet away. However, he did not die. It was obvious that the woman had shown mercy. After sending the middle-aged man flying, the mysterious woman looked at the stone tablet and slammed her fist forward. The middle-aged man's eyes almost popped out of their sockets at the sight of this. No. The stone tablet was their faith, their supreme faith. It was the most sacred existence of their era. When the mysterious woman's power blasted against the stone tablet, it shook violently. However, it did not shatter. Moreover, the mysterious woman's powerful force had vanished without a trace. A trace of surprise flashed through the mysterious woman's eyes. Not bad. At this moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly appeared from the stone tablet. The mysterious woman blinked and said, "Farewell." With that, she turned around and disappeared. As she left, she took away many more treasures. The middle-aged man was speechless. The stone tablet gradually trembled. After a long time, an ancient voice sounded out from within it. "You've gone too far." The middle-aged man hurriedly nodded. "This woman isn't just an ordinary kind of bully. She comes here every few days to bully others. She's not human." At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded out from within the stone tablet. "Gu Yao, awaken the clansmen." With that, a black token suddenly floated out from the stone tablet. The middle-aged man called Gu Yao instantly became excited at the sight of the black token. He hurriedly caught the black token. "As you command, exalted God." With that, he turned around and left. Before long, countless powerful auras shot into the sky throughout the entire northern wilderness, and the seals left behind by the Tao ancestor were directly destroyed by a mysterious force. Taoism. The third young lady, who was sitting cross-legged in the main hall, suddenly opened her eyes. After a long time, she slowly closed her eyes. This crazy woman. In a small bar in the Divine City, the shopkeeper behind the counter suddenly looked in the direction of the northern wilderness. In the next moment, he turned around and came to a small courtyard. He bowed slightly towards the room in front of him. "Master, there's something strange in the northern wilderness." After a long time, a voice sounded out from the room. "I know." The shopkeeper hesitated for a moment and then said, "Do you want me to go investigate?" In the bar, the voice said, "No need. This isn't something you can interfere with." The shopkeeper bowed slightly and then left. Soon, many powerful auras rushed out of the northern desolate land. These mysterious experts were all above the immortal realm. After they left the northern desolate land, they went straight to the fifth dimension. Orcworld. In the starry sky, a middle-aged man stood quietly. His hands were behind his back and his eyes were closed. This person was the Beast King of the Beastmen tribe. At this moment, a Beast Man suddenly appeared in front of the Beast King. The Beast Man bowed slightly to the Beast King. "King, there's a strange movement in the northern wilderness. They seem to want to make a move on that human young Master Yi." The Beast King frowned. "Has the northern wilderness gone mad?" The Beast Man shook his head. "I don't know. I only know that the northern wilderness is furious. They are all super experts above the god realm. Above the divine realm. The Beast King was silent, his face somewhat gloomy. The orc said in a deep voice, I'm afraid that young Master Yi is no match for this northern wilderness. After a moment of silence, the Beast King sighed in a low voice. Call people to the fifth dimension. The orc was stunned. King, are we going to be enemies with the northern wilderness? That is, the Beast King's face was somewhat ugly. Do you think I want to interfere? Didn't you hear what that woman said? Her brother is dead. She wants us to be buried with him. Buried with him. Damn, she really doesn't listen to reason at all. Based on what? Based on what? I refuse to accept this. The Beast King waved his hand. Go and call people. The orc nodded and was about to leave. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. Call people? There's no need to call. The Beast King turned his head and looked. Not far away, a woman was slowly walking over. It was the mysterious woman from the Holy Land. The mysterious woman looked at the Beast King and smiled. From now on, the Beastmen are not allowed to take half a step out of the Beast world. The Beast King narrowed his eyes. Who do you think you are? After saying that, he punched out. The mysterious woman flicked her sleeves. Boom. The Beast King retreated tens of thousands of feet away. Not only that, the entire starry sky became illusory. The Beast King's right arm that punched out was shattered by a powerful force. The Beast King was somewhat dumbfounded. The mysterious woman looked at the Beast King and smiled. If the Beastmen dare to take a step out of the Beast world, I will destroy your Beastmen race. The Beast King stared at the mysterious woman. He was extremely shocked. Who are you? The mysterious woman blinked. I am Yi Xian's aunt. This is our family matter. Outsiders should not interfere, understand? The Beast King. P.S. The update is late. 2 more chapters. If the update is late in the future, the update will be doubled. Chapter 1486. The Beast King stared at the mysterious woman. We are going to help your nephew. The mysterious woman smiled. No need. The Beast King said after a moment of silence. You want him dead. A trace of surprise flashed in the mysterious woman's eyes. How did you know? The Beast King looked at the mysterious woman. Northern wilderness is your doing. The mysterious woman laughed. As expected of the Beast King. Very smart. Everything you say is right. The Beast King said in a deep voice. Your Excellency, do you know that he has a sister? The mysterious woman nodded. I do. The invincible Tian Ming. The Beast King looked at the mysterious woman with a serious expression. Since you know, why do you still want to kill him? The mysterious woman smiled. That's my business. As for you Beastmen, just stay in your Beastman realm and don't come out. I have no enmity with you and I don't want to destroy you. Do you understand? The Beast King was silent. The mysterious woman looked at the Beast King and smiled. I'm not joking with you. And I won't give you a second chance. Then she turned and left. The Beast King was silent. Not far away the Beastman said, King. The Beast King slowly closed his eyes. I can't afford to offend my sister and I can't afford to offend this auntie either. Let them play by themselves. I can't beat anyone. I'm scared. I'm scared. Then he turned and left. After the mysterious woman left, she did not return to the sacred region. Instead she went to the divine city. When she entered the tavern, the waiter and the shopkeeper's face suddenly became serious. The shopkeeper walked in front of the mysterious woman and bowed. Your Excellency is? The mysterious woman smiled. A pot of spring sword. The shopkeeper looked at the mysterious woman. Please wait. Soon the shopkeeper brought out a pot of spring sword. The mysterious woman opened the bottle and gently sniffed. Not bad. Suddenly, a voice came from the inner courtyard. What's the matter? The mysterious woman picked up a peanut and put it in her mouth. I don't want to kill you. After all, we are old acquaintances. The inner courtyard was silent. The mysterious woman said again, This is our family's private matter. Outsiders should stay out of it. The inner courtyard was still silent. The mysterious woman smiled and said, I want you to give me an answer. Otherwise I won't be polite. In the inner courtyard, a sigh sounded. Why did you have to do this? The mysterious woman chuckled. You know the reason. In the inner courtyard the voice said, after all, he is your nephew. The mysterious woman narrowed her eyes. Boom. The entire tavern turned into nothingness in an instant. The shopkeeper and the waiter's expressions changed drastically. Their eyes were filled with terror. At this moment both of them could smell the scent of death. The mysterious woman poured herself a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. Why is he still alive? As she spoke, she turned around to look at a small house. Even though she was smiling, it was slightly bone-piercingly gloomy, and it caused others to shiver. On what basis? Inside the hut the man was silent. The mysterious woman smiled and stood up. For the sake of an old friend, I don't want to kill you. After all, this matter has nothing to do with you. However, I don't want you seniors to help him. If you dare to interfere, don't blame me for being ruthless. Then she stood up and left. At this moment, the man in the hut suddenly said, have you ever considered his feelings? The mysterious woman stopped. After a moment of silence, she said, I don't hate him. He tried his best back then. However, I still want to seek justice. The man in the hut sighed again. Have you ever thought about that woman? He will be considerate and won't hurt you. However, that woman. To continue this chapter, please continue to the next page. If you do this, you will anger that woman. Once she returns, many people will die. Do you understand? The mysterious woman smiled and said, so what? Anyway, I've already prepared myself to die. I'm not even afraid of death, so why would I be afraid of her? The man in the hut sighed again. Is there really no way to resolve this matter? The mysterious woman smiled and walked into the distance. Either he dies or I die. Soon, the mysterious woman disappeared into the distance. At this moment, the shopkeeper came before the hut and bowed respectfully. Master. This man. The man in the hut sighed softly and said no more. Taoism. After the mysterious woman left, she went directly to Taoism. Inside the hall, the third lady sat cross-legged in front of the statue of the Taoism's ancestor. The mysterious woman looked at the statue of the Taoism's ancestor and said with a smile, your master is a very amazing person. The third lady opened her eyes and said with a smile, thank you. The mysterious woman looked at the third lady. You're also a smart person. The third lady said, boss, I won't interfere in the matters of the fifth dimension. I don't have the ability to interfere. The mysterious woman smiled and said, I'm not here to cause trouble for you. I'm here to ask you something. The third lady nodded. Boss, please speak. The mysterious woman said, do you know where the spirit of the great Tao is? The spirit of the great Tao. After a moment of silence, the third lady said, to tell you the truth, I'm also looking for the spirit of the great Tao. The mysterious woman smiled and said, you don't know either? The third lady nodded. When young Master Yi combined the 9 scriptures into one, the spirit of the great Tao did appear. However, for some reason she escaped. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case. The mysterious woman looked at the third lady. Why do you think she escaped? The third lady shook her head. I really don't know. The mysterious woman smiled and said, make a guess. After a moment of silence, the third lady said softly, she should have sensed the calamity on young Master Yi, or perhaps she sensed your existence. The mysterious woman blinked. Am I that scary? The third young miss hesitated for a moment and then she said, sir, you don't seem like an extremely evil person. Moreover, with your strength you don't need the Taoist scriptures at all, so why do you still target Zhou Xian? Is it a personal grudge? The mysterious woman smiled and said, it is indeed a personal grudge. The third lady nodded. I understand. The mysterious woman glanced at the statue of the Taoism's ancestor and said with a smile, I'm leaving. With that she turned around and left. The third lady said, boss, take care. The mysterious woman smiled and said, I'm not the boss. The woman in the plain dress is the real boss. The third lady said softly, I can't defeat them. They are all bosses. The mysterious woman laughed and said, Miss, your future is limitless. After saying that, she disappeared. In the hall, the third lady looked at the statue of the Taoism's ancestor and said softly, Master. Disciple finally understands what you said. There is always someone better than you. In the 5-dimensional universe. In the hall, Nian Nian was leaning on Yi Xian's thigh and was sleeping soundly. In front of the two of them there were fish bones on the ground. Yi Xian looked at the sky outside the hall and pondered. During this time he had been thinking about a question. Was the mysterious expert in the Holy Land the woman who claimed to be his aunt? If it was, it didn't make sense. The reason why his bloodline could be awakened was because of the other party's help. Since the other party wanted him dead, why did she help him improve his bloodline? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. This chapter is not over, please turn the page. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. The next moment he gently placed Nian Nian on the ground and disappeared from the hall. The moment Yi Xian disappeared, Nian Nian suddenly opened her eyes. In the five-dimensional universe, Yi Xian looked at the group of people in front of him. Who are you? In front of him stood more than 30 people. These people's auras were extremely powerful and had already surpassed the god realm. The middle-aged man in the lead was Gu Yao. Gu Yao stared at Yi Xian. Where is that woman? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Woman? What woman? Gu Yao stared at Yi Xian and slowly clenched his fists. Your name is Yi Xian, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Speaking of which, is there some misunderstanding? Misunderstanding? Gu Yao's face became a little sinister. Misunderstanding? You're telling me it's a misunderstanding? As his voice fell, he suddenly blasted out a punch. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly and raised his sword. Boom. The space in front of the two of them exploded. Then Yi Xian retreated hundreds of feet. As for Gu Yao, he also retreated hundreds of feet. Gu Yao stared at Yi Xian. I'll ask you one last time, where is that woman? Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand. Sir, I think there must be some misunderstanding between us. I think you don't want to be used by others, right? Gu Yao sneered. Misunderstanding? Yi Xian, you actually have the nerve to say it's a misunderstanding. You absorbed the souls of my clansmen, and then you tell me it's a misunderstanding? Souls. Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment his face turned ugly. At this moment he was sure that the mysterious enemy was his so-called aunt. That woman was digging a hole for him. Damn it. This hole was too deep. At this moment Gu Yao sneered. Tell me, is this a misunderstanding? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, I want to say that these souls were forcefully absorbed by a woman. Do you believe me? Yi Xian. Gu Yao suddenly said fiercely, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Forcefully absorbed by you. What is she to you? Is she your mother? Yi Xian was slightly helpless. I really didn't lie to you this time. She really did force me to absorb them. Gu Yao stared fixedly at Yi Xian as if he wanted to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly speechless. Why doesn't anyone believe me when I tell the truth? Damn it. That woman. At this moment Yi Xian felt that he was in a terrible state. But he didn't understand why that woman would do that. Meanwhile, Gu Yao suddenly said, let that woman come out. Yi Xian gazed at Gu Yao. I don't know where she is. Really? Gu Yao's face was expressionless. It's fine. I don't believe that she won't come out once I catch you. As he spoke, he charged directly at Yi Xian. Behind him, the super experts also rushed over. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly held his sword horizontally to his neck. Seeing this, Gu Yao suddenly stopped and looked at Yi Xian. What are you doing? Yi Xian looked at Gu Yao and sneered. You want to use me to threaten my aunt? No way. If you dare take another step forward, I'll kill myself. Let me tell you, once I die, my aunt will go crazy and take revenge on you. He will hide in the dark and take revenge on you. Let me ask you, are you afraid? Gu Yao narrowed his eyes. I don't believe that you really dare to kill yourself. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly held his sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Yi Xian immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Gu Yao was dumbfounded. Damn it, are all modern people so crazy? Suicide just because you say so? End of this chapter. Chapter 1487. Needless to say, Gu Yao was quite stunned right now. He really hadn't intended to kill Yi Xian, and he'd mainly intended to capture Yi Xian so that the mysterious woman wouldn't act against him. However, he'd never imagined that Yi Xian would be so staunch and take his own life just like that. That's too ruthless. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke in a hoarse voice. So long as I die, then my aunt will definitely stop at nothing to take revenge on all of you. Gu Yao gazed at Yi Xian and spoke fiercely. She killed countless members of our clan and even took countless treasures from us. Xian's eyelids twitched when he heard this. Damn it. That woman is really ruthless. Gu Yao stared fixedly at Xian. All of you will repay this enmity with your blood. Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, I'll take all of you to her. Do all of you dare? Gu Yao was slightly hesitant. Even though he'd awakened most of the experts in his clan, he still didn't have the information to deal with that mysterious woman. That woman was too strong. Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, I'll tell you the truth. Don't get angry. That is, the number of people you have is really not enough for my aunt to fight. Do you know how strong she is? Gu Yao gazed at Xian. How strong? Xian spoke seriously. I don't know the specifics. All I know is that she kills God-rank realm experts like ants, and experts above the God-rank realm can't even withstand a single blow from her. Gu Yao glanced at Xian and didn't say anything. Xian continued, I think that the few of you aren't enough. Why don't you call more people over and then I'll take all of you to her? Gu Yao gazed at Xian. You don't seem to be worried about her. Xian laughed embarrassedly. My aunt is really good at fighting. Gu Yao gazed at Xian and laughed coldly. Just you wait. And that aunt of yours. I'll make all of you pay the price. With that he turned around and left. Seeing that Gu Yao and the rest had left, Xian pulled out the sword from his abdomen, his face gradually darkening. Damn it, that woman was setting him up. He finally understood why the other party forced him to absorb those souls and even gave him treasures. They wanted to make him a scapegoat. Although he had obtained some benefits, it was obvious that he had formed a bad relationship with this mysterious force. What was he trying to do? Xian sheathed his sword and turned to leave. At this moment, Bai Dizzy appeared in front of Xian. He glanced at the end of the starry sky in the distance. Are you all right? Xian shook his head. I'll handle it. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of sword light and vanished into the distance. In the starry sky, Bai Dizzy's eyes flashed with a trace of worry. Saint level. In front of the bamboo house, the Holy Master was bowing and no one knew what he was saying. After a while, the woman in the bamboo house shook her head and smiled. This little fellow is really interesting. He sent those fellows from the wilderness north away with just a few words. He's just like his father. His eloquence is extraordinary. The Holy Master hesitated for a moment and said, Master, what kind of force is the wilderness north? The woman said softly, It's a very, very ancient force. They belong to the prehistoric civilization. The Holy Master frowned slightly. Prehistoric civilization? The woman nodded. It's a civilization that existed before the Taoist scripture civilization. However, there are no records of that civilization in the entire universe because the Taoist scripture civilization was 1,000,000 years away from that civilization. During that 1,000,000 years there was a blank period. In other words, it was the primitive era. During that era, there were pitifully few humans and they didn't even have a written language. Therefore there are no records of the prehistoric era. As for why they sealed themselves, no one knows. At this point she paused for a moment and continued. However, this prehistoric civilization is a little strange. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors above, Xian has no talent, no virtue. From this moment onwards, Xian's position as crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to dismiss Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a clan matter, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his crown prince position. This is unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder said coldly, then flog him 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang, and he knew that his chance to show off had come. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince position and it is everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, what's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. I'm Zhang Mu, greeting the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, you're not bad. After I become the crown prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and he hurriedly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the crown prince and I will do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded slightly, drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall, so don't show any mercy. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was torn and there was blood everywhere. This person was Zhou Xian who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Boo! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However she did not cry. She only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, what's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, you're not bad. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince. Yi Lang nodded, drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 1488. Needless to say Yi Xian was a little shocked at this moment. His own father killed his own grandfather? Can it be played like this? At this moment the voice sighed softly. It's not your father's fault. It's your grandfather who wanted to devour your father's bloodline. Moreover, your grandfather is really not a good person. These are all old matters. You will naturally know about these grudges in the future. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I don't really want to know about these grudges now. I just want to know if anyone has come to take that woman. The voice said, Originally, your bloodline could suppress her, but now your bloodline has been suppressed and sealed. How can you play with her? Xian was speechless. I also didn't know that my aunt was such a scammer. The voice said, after all, she is your aunt. Why don't you go and talk to her? Maybe you can resolve some of the grudges from the past. After all, you are quite good at bluffing. Xian was speechless. The voice said again, Aunt still has things to do. Take care of yourself. In the hall, Xian sighed softly. Grudges? What grudges? What does the matters of the older generation have to do with me? Why are they all beating me up? After a long time, Xian sighed again and turned to leave. I can only go and talk to that woman. Just as eldest aunt said, they were a family, so why should they fight? It would be good to talk. Of course I can't beat her. After leaving the four-dimensional universe, Xian came to the holy region. Let's talk. As soon as Xian arrived at the holy region, the holy master appeared in front of him. At this time, the holy master's arm had already recovered. The holy master looked at Xian. What do you want? Xian said with a smile. Kill people. Oh no, chat. I'm here to chat. The holy master stared at Xian. Chat. What do we have to chat about? Xian pointed below. I'm here to talk to my aunt. Holy Lord frowned. Xian, what nonsense are you spouting? Xian blinked. Holy Lord, don't you know that the woman below is my aunt? My dear aunt. The sacred leader glared at Xian. Are you here to acknowledge your kin? Xian nodded. Yes. Saint Master was expressionless. There's no one down there. You can leave. Xian chuckled. He took out the supreme sword and gently tapped it on his palm. He didn't say anything and just smiled. The sacred lord's expression was somewhat unsightly. Damn it, this guy is threatening me. However, he really couldn't do anything to Xian. God realm experts couldn't do anything to Xian because Xian's physical body was too monstrous. Deity realm powerhouses were already unable to pose any substantial threat to Xian's fleshy body. Suddenly, a voice resounded from below. Ask him to come down. The sacred lord bowed respectfully to the people below. Then he looked at Xian and said, You can leave now. Xian walked down, and it didn't take long for him to arrive before a bamboo forest. He passed through the bamboo forest and saw a bamboo house. At this moment, a voice resounded from within the house. Come in. Xian didn't hesitate and walked in. The furnishings within the house were very simple. There was only a bed, a bamboo table, and 2 bamboo chairs. The woman sat before the table and was reading a book. The woman smiled when she saw Xian. Sit. Xian nodded. He sat before the woman. There was a chessboard on the table and the white piece was in a hopeless situation. Xian smiled. Is this white piece me? The woman shook her head and smiled. It's not you. It's me. Xian frowned slightly. You? The woman smiled. Yes. No matter where I go, I'll die in the end. Xian looked at the woman. I heard from others that you're really my aunt? The woman nodded. It's true and we're related. Xian was puzzled. Why did you do this to me? The woman smiled. Some grudges. Xian asked. The older generation? The woman nodded. Xian looked at the woman. Is it appropriate for you to bully the younger generation for the grudges of the older generation? The woman smiled. I can't beat the older generation. Hearing this, Xian's mouth twitched and he almost went berserk. F***ck, you can't beat the older generation, so you come to beat me? F***c me. The woman smiled. Did you come to me today to talk about this? Xian said, I want to understand something. The woman put down the book in her hand and smiled. Ask away. Xian looked at the woman. You can kill me, right? The woman nodded. I can indeed kill you, but that's under the premise that no one else interferes. But if I touch you, someone will definitely stop me. Just like now, although it's only the 2 of us, I can't kill you if I want to. Xian frowned. Why? The woman smiled. That's not the point. Xian was silent for a moment, then said, I want to know about the grudges of the older generation. The woman shook her head. I can't tell you. No, I don't want to tell you. Xian looked at the woman. So you're saying that you're determined to kill me? The woman smiled. Yes. Xian nodded. I understand. With that he stood up and left. When he walked to the door, he turned to look at the woman. You've done so much, so it shouldn't be just to use others to kill me, right? The woman smiled. Yes. Yi Xian said, the cause of disaster? The woman nodded. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I understand. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Within the bamboo house, the woman's smile gradually vanished. After a long time, she placed her right hand lightly on the chessboard, and in the next moment, the entire chessboard transformed into nothingness. Everything was destroyed. There was no winner. Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension and he looked for Bai Dizzy. Within the hall, Yi Xian said in a low voice, investigate those mysterious powers that came looking for me earlier and find out their origins. Bai Dizzy said in a low voice, I've already sent people to investigate before you left. However, there's no news. Yi Xian said softly, then they should be quite far away from us. Bai Dizzy nodded, I've already asked Black City for help and they've agreed. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, you must do it secretly. Otherwise you might implicate them. Bai Dizzy nodded slightly, I understand. As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before he said, do you know who's behind this? Yi Xian nodded. I do. Bai Dizzy fell silent for a moment before he said, no matter what, be careful. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Bai Dizzy was about to speak when a figure suddenly appeared within the hall. Yi Xian looked at the figure, and the figure bowed slightly to Yi Xian before leaving behind a scroll and vanishing. Yi Xian opened his palm and the scroll appeared in his hand. He opened it and there were only 4 words on it. Divine City, Northern Wilderness. Divine City? Northern Wilderness. Yi Xian exerted some force with his right hand and the scroll vanished. The mysterious power from before was from the Northern Wilderness. That woman was obviously using the Northern Wilderness. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, I'm going out for a while. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Northern Wilderness. Gu Yao knelt devoutly in front of the stone tablet, and behind him were dozens of super overlords. These people had all surpassed the immortal state. At this moment, all of them were kneeling in front of the stone tablet. After an unknown period of time, the stone tablet trembled slightly, and in the next moment, a woman walked out of it. The woman only wore a black tube top and most of her skin was exposed to the air. She only wore a very short leather skirt, and her legs were as white as jade. After the woman appeared, she slowly closed her eyes, and Gu Yao and the others in front of her hurriedly bowed respectfully. Greetings, Divine Envoy. The woman gently hooked her finger and a black gauze suddenly appeared on her body, which made her look even sexier. After a while, the woman suddenly opened her eyes, and her gaze pierced through the starry sky, directly to the sacred region. Inside the bamboo house, the mysterious woman who was reading a book suddenly opened her eyes. She turned her head to take a look and said with a smile, interesting. It seems that I've underestimated this prehistoric civilization. Northern Wilderness. The Divine Envoy opened her palm, and a machete suddenly appeared in her hand. In the next moment she lightly slashed in front of her. Whoosh! The space in front of her cracked and almost at the same time in the bamboo house in the sacred region, the space in front of the mysterious woman suddenly cracked and a black blade flashed out. The mysterious woman's expression was calm and she lightly pointed with her fingers. Boom! The blade shook violently and then slowly turned into nothingness. The Divine Envoy swung the blade again. Whoosh! A blade suddenly appeared between the mysterious woman's eyebrows, but the blade stopped half an inch away from the mysterious woman's eyebrows. This was because the mysterious woman's jade-like fingers had caught the blade. The mysterious woman gently pinched the blade with her fingers, and the blade turned into nothingness. Then she lightly pointed forward. In the sacred region, the space in front of the Divine Envoy suddenly cracked and a finger shot out. The Divine Envoy's expression was calm. She opened her palm and countless blade auras flew out of it. Whoosh 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 whoosh. In an instant the finger was directly cut into powder. In the sacred region inside the bamboo house, the woman smiled and did not attack again. In the northern wilderness, the Divine Envoy also did not attack again. Several blade auras flew around her. Gu Yao hesitated and then asked, Divine Envoy? The Divine Envoy said softly, very strong. Very strong. Hearing this, Gu Yao's expression became serious. The Divine Envoy slowly closed her eyes. This woman forced her way into the northern wilderness, took those souls and bullied the northern wilderness. Just for that young man Yi Xian? Gu Yao nodded. Yes. That young man has already absorbed those souls. Then she paused and then said, that young man is not simple, especially his body, which is extremely powerful, and his bloodline has extremely strong healing abilities. The divine envoy was expressionless. I'll go and see this person. You guys wait here for the underworld envoy. Underworld envoy. Hearing this, Gu Yao's heart jumped and he quickly nodded. Yes. The divine envoy did not speak again. She took a step forward and with that she disappeared from the northern wilderness. Chapter 1489. In the starry sky, Yi Xian rode on his flying sword. After a long time he arrived at the God City. Just as he was about to step into the God City, a powerful divine sense suddenly enveloped him. Yi Xian frowned slightly. At this moment, that divine sense suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian was slightly startled. A moment later he continued forward. There was only a small tavern in the city. The small tavern was very new, as if it had just been built. Yi Xian walked into the tavern. Inside the tavern there were only two people. One was the tavern manager and the other was a waiter. At this moment both of them were looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was a little baffled by their gazes. He asked, "Do the two of you know me?" The waiter looked at the manager. The manager waved his hand and the waiter retreated. The manager looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Do you want to drink? The best wine here is Spring Sword." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said with a smile, "I'll have a pot." The manager smiled and said, "Please sit." Yi Xian walked to the side and sat down. The manager immediately brought over a pot of wine and two side dishes. Just as the manager was about to leave, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Let's have a chat?" The manager hesitated for a moment before nodding, "Sure." He sat in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Senior knows me." The manager smiled, "Why do you say so?" Yi Xian said, "When I first came in, the way you looked at me." The manager was silent. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "I'll be more direct. Are you in cahoots with that woman?" The manager seemed to know who Yi Xian was talking about. He immediately shook his head. No. Yi Xian asked again, "Do you know me?" The manager nodded. "My master knows you." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Your master? Can I meet him?" The manager shook his head. "It's not convenient for the time being." Yi Xian smiled and asked, "Why?" The manager hesitated for a moment before he said, "Young Master Yi, your true objective for coming here this time is for that woman, right?" Yi Xian nodded. The innkeeper sighed in a low voice. "Young Master Yi, to be honest, that woman also came to the tavern, and we couldn't do anything to her." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian smiled and said, "Then I'll ask about the northern wilderness." Northern wilderness. The shopkeeper said, "We know a little about Dao Yi. The northern wilderness is a prehistoric civilization, a civilization before the Tao scripture. Their cultivation system is completely different from ours. Their cultivation system is also different. Moreover, they also cultivate faith energy, but it's different from ours. Moreover, some of their cultivation methods are very special. For example, they cultivate psychokinesis, which we know nothing about. Apart from that, they also cultivate underworld energy, a special kind of power." As he said this, his expression became serious. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "To tell you the truth, that woman must have gone to the desolate north. Then she brought out the souls of some of the desolate north's powerhouses and let me absorb them." The innkeeper looked at Yi Xian and asked, "You absorbed them?" Yi Xian shrugged. "She forced me to absorb them." The innkeeper said in a deep voice, "She wants to make the northern wilderness your enemy." Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, the innkeeper said, "What are you going to do?" Yi Xian said, "I want to go to the northern wilderness and clear up this misunderstanding. But I'm afraid I won't be able to return. They are not only strong but they also have a lot of people." The innkeeper hesitated and said, "You absorbed all the souls?" Yi Xian nodded. The innkeeper sighed again. "That's not a simple problem." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "I'm not particularly worried about the northern wilderness. I'm worried about that woman. My intuition tells me that she's plotting something." The innkeeper nodded. "Master also said that she's plotting something. It's not just to cause trouble for you. It might have something to do with the cause of misfortune on you. Yi Xian nodded. My guess is also the cause of misfortune. But I don't know the specifics. The innkeeper glanced at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, you can't fight her alone. Master suggests that you find someone from the older generation. Yi Xian shrugged. I can't find anyone. By the way, can you help me contact Qing? The innkeeper asked. The woman in the plain dress? Yi Xian nodded. The innkeeper shook his head. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The innkeeper said in a deep voice. Young Master Yi, Master also doesn't suggest that you let that senior come back. Because if she comes back, things will become more complicated. Also, your aunt's target might be the woman in the plain dress. Yi Xian frowned. Kill Qing? The innkeeper shook his head. She doesn't have that ability. She might be plotting against you and the woman in the plain dress. The only thing that can restrain the woman in the plain dress is the cause of misfortune. So, when he spoke up to her, he sighed softly. Actually, Master isn't too sure about her true objective. The only thing I know is that it's related to the disaster cause. Because if she wants to kill you, she can only rely on the disaster cause. Yi Xian suddenly asked. Can I see your master? The innkeeper shook his head. Master can't see you. Please understand. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Let's talk about the northern wilderness. The northern wilderness now sees me as their mortal enemy. Although I tricked them into leaving, I believe that they will definitely come back soon. The innkeeper suddenly said. Go find Miss Ding. Miss Ding. Yi Xian blinked. Who is it? The innkeeper took out a scroll and placed it in front of Yi Xian. Young Master, you take care. Then he got up and left. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. He picked up the scroll and left. Not long after, he suddenly turned around. Not far away, the tavern suddenly burst into flames. Soon the entire tavern turned into nothingness. Yi Xian said softly. I'm sorry. I didn't know I would implicate you. Thank you. Then he turned around and left. In the starry sky, Yi Xian opened the scroll. It was actually a map. Miss Ding? Yi Xian was curious. Who was this Miss Ding that the tavern senior mentioned? Would he implicate her if he went to find her? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian finally chose to find this Miss Ding. Otherwise, who knew what would happen if he allowed that woman to continue? He really couldn't beat her. Even now, he still didn't know how strong that woman was. Since it was a grudge between the older generation, it was better to let the older generation solve it themselves. I won't take the blame. In the fifth dimension. On this day, a woman suddenly arrived in the starry sky of the fifth dimension. It was the divine envoy. The divine envoy stood in the starry sky and looked down at the fifth dimension. After a long time, a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. This universe is a bit interesting. Then she suddenly turned around. Not far away there stood a little girl. Moon Yanyan. The divine envoy looked at Moon Yanyan. After a while, she looked at the candied fruit in Moon Yanyan's hand and said softly. You're very strong. Moon Yanyan said, the northern wilderness. The divine envoy nodded. Moon Yanyan said with a smile, want to talk? The divine envoy looked at Moon Yanyan's candied fruit and asked, is there a need to talk? Moon Yanyan smiled slightly. That woman is using you. The divine envoy looked calm. That woman wants to use us to target that young man? Moon Yanyan said with a smile. It seems that I can save my breath. However, I am a bit curious. How did you know? Or is it just a guess? The divine envoy slowly clenched her right hand that was hidden behind her back. I have fought with her. She is very strong. It is meaningless for such a strong person to snatch those souls. Those treasures are also meaningless to her. Then there are only two possibilities left. First, she is really doing it for that young man. Second, she is framing that young man and wants the northern wilderness to become enemies with that young man. Then she looked down. This time I came to see that young man in this universe. This universe is not simple. You are very strong. However, you are a bit strange. You are in a very strange state now. Moon Yanyan said with a smile. Strange state. The divine envoy nodded. There seems to be something bothering you. Moon Yanyan smiled. The cause of misfortune. The divine envoy frowned. The cause of misfortune? Moon Yanyan asked. There is no cause of misfortune in your era. The divine envoy said softly. You are talking about the body of misfortune. Moon Yanyan was a bit curious. The body of misfortune? The divine emissary nodded. The cause of disaster you mentioned should be what we call the body of disaster, the source of all evil karma. However, this kind of person has never appeared even in our era. In our era there was a good body. As for this body of disaster, not only did it not appear in our era, it did not even appear in the most ancient era. Mu Nianyan licked the candied fruit and said, "Do you have a way to solve this body of misfortune?" The divine envoy looked at Mu Nianyan's candied fruit again. "Yes." Mu Nianyan blinked. "There is." The divine envoy said, "The body of misfortune cannot be directly erased or changed, but it can be reversed, forcibly reversed." Mu Nianyan asked, "How do you reverse it?" The divine envoy looked at Mu Nianyan. "Become stronger. So strong that no karma can touch you." Mu Nianyan was silent. Wasn't she talking about the woman in the plain dress? That woman was the one who no karma dared to touch. But it was still very difficult for Zhou Xian to reach the level of the woman in the plain dress, at least not in a short time. At this moment the divine envoy suddenly said, "That young man can live until now with the body of misfortune is because someone is blocking the source of the body of misfortune for him, right?" Mu Nianyan nodded. "Yes." The divine envoy frowned slightly. "Someone can do that?" Mu Nianyan smiled. "Yes." The divine envoy shook his head. "Impossible. This cause of misfortune is simply... No, you have no reason to lie to me. Moreover, that young man is indeed still alive." Mu Nianyan licked the candied fruit and smiled. It was good to talk to smart people because you didn't have to explain too much nonsense. At this moment the divine envoy suddenly asked, "What are you licking?" Mu Nianyan smiled. "Candied fruit." The divine envoy hesitated. "It looks delicious. Can I lick it?" Mu Nianyan blinked and said, This is a divine item. It blooms every 10,000 years and bears fruit every 10,000 years. Look at this string of mine, there are 6 of them. They have been bearing fruit for 60,000 years. The divine envoy. Chapter 1490. 60,000 years old. The saint blinked. "Really?" Mu Nianyan said seriously, "Of course. However, I can give you a skewer." With that she took out a skewer of candied haws and handed it to the saint. The saint hesitated for a moment before taking the candied haws. She licked it gently. It was a little sweet and sour, but there was no spiritual energy or energy. She looked at Mu Nianyan and asked, "Why doesn't this thing have any energy or spiritual energy?" Nianyan blinked, feeling a little awkward. How was she going to fool him? Fortunately, the saint did not continue to ask this question. She licked it again and said, "This thing is sour and sweet. There's an indescribable feeling when you lick it." Mu Nianyan smiled and said, "Delicious, right?" The saint nodded. "Indeed." With that she glanced at Mu Nianyan and said, "I can't take it from you for free." When she spoke up to hear, she opened her palm to reveal a pure white spirit fruit. As soon as it appeared, a wave of pure spiritual energy instantly spread out from her palm. Nianyan blinked. "This is," the saint said, "my clan's sacred fruit. It blooms every 10,000 years and bears fruit every 10,000 years. After eating, it can cleanse the marrow and nourish the limbs and bones. Most importantly, it tastes good and delicious." Nianyan looked at the saint. "Is it for me?" The saint nodded. "Yes." Nianyan smiled and said, "Actually, this candied haw isn't that precious." The saint nodded. "I know. This thing should be some snacks of this era, right?" Nianyan nodded. "Yes." The saint smiled slightly. "No matter what, I ate your candied haw and I don't like to owe others, so you can keep it." Nianyan shook her head. "You have your principles and I have mine. Just give me a skewer of candied haw in the future." The saint thought for a moment and said, "That's fine too." Nianyan smiled and said, "Let's talk about that woman. Are you interested?" The saint nodded. "Yes." Nianyan smiled and said, "You already know the truth. What are you going to do now?" The saint shook his head. "I don't know how strong she is and I don't know what she will do next." As she said that, she looked at Mu Nianyan. "Because you're affected by the disaster constitution, you can't attack openly, right?" Nianyan nodded. "Yes." The divine envoy said softly, "Then things will be a bit tricky." Nianyan said, "If I'm not wrong, she should have a backup plan, but we don't know what this backup plan is for now. Most importantly, you've already seen through her scheme. I'm worried that she has already anticipated this and has a backup plan. The saint nodded slightly. That's what I'm worried about. As she spoke, she shook her head. I wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to. Nian Nian blinked. Why don't we join forces? The saint was silent. Nian Nian asked, Are you worried about the body of disaster? The sage nodded. Yes. Nian Nian smiled and said, She killed many of your people. The saint looked at Nian Nian. But if we continue to be enemies with her without knowing her true strength, we might lose more people. Moreover, her real intention is to target you. My clan doesn't want to get involved in this mess for now. Nian Nian nodded. I understand. However, you guys still have to be careful. She probably won't let this go. The saint nodded. Thank you for the reminder. As she said that, she licked the candied fruit and said, I still have something to do. We'll talk another day. With that, she turned and left. Nian Nian looked at the saint in the distance and remained silent. What will that woman do next? Somewhere in the starry sky, Zhou Xian was flying on his sword. He didn't know where he was going because he was following the map. Miss Ding. He was also curious about this Miss Ding. The tavern owner had asked him to look for her. She should be able to restrain that woman, right? At this moment, the space not far away from him suddenly trembled. Zhou Xian frowned slightly and clenched his right hand tightly. He clenched the sword in his hand because he felt a murderous intent. A murderous intent that came out of nowhere. At this moment, the murderous intent suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the space split open and a woman walked out. It was the mysterious woman from the sacred land. Zhou Xian looked at the woman in silence. The woman said with a smile, Are you going to look for help? Zhou Xian hurriedly shook his head. No, I'm just strolling around. The woman laughed and said, I like to see you lie with your eyes wide open. It's really interesting. Zhou Xian was speechless. The woman said with a smile, Go back. Zhou Xian looked at the woman. Are you afraid that I'll look for that person? The woman shook her head. I'm not afraid because she can't do anything to me. However, with her around, it'll be a little troublesome to carry out many of my plans because she knows me better than Miss Nian and knows more than Miss Nian. Zhou Xian was silent. The woman looked at Zhou Xian and said with a smile, Are you going back yourself or do you want me to beat you up? Zhou Xian looked at the woman. How about a spar? The woman said with a smile, Are you serious? Zhou Xian nodded. I'm serious. It's a spar, the kind where we stop when it's appropriate. The woman laughed. Stop when it's appropriate. Since you want to know my strength, then come. Zhou Xian suddenly disappeared from the spot. The space in front of the woman suddenly tore open and a sword beam appeared an inch away from the woman's eyebrows. Instant kill sword. Extreme instant kill sword. However, such a fast sword was caught by 2 fingers. The woman held on to Zhou Xian's sword and smiled. A very fast sword. However, even Tingyun can't do anything to me with this sword, let alone you. As she said that, her fingers trembled slightly. Boom. Zhou Xian and his sword were sent flying hundreds of feet away. The woman looked at Zhou Xian. Again. Zhou Xian looked at the woman. The next moment he suddenly appeared in front of the woman. Immediately after, 4 types of domains enveloped the woman. At the same time he held the sword with both hands and slashed forward. He used all his strength in this sword. Of course, it lacked the crazy demon bloodline power. Even so, the power of this sword was enough to destroy heaven and earth. However, even with the support of 4 types of domains, this sword was still caught by the woman's 2 fingers. The woman's 2 fingers trembled slightly. Boom. Zhou Xian's 4 types of domains were directly shattered. At the same time he was sent flying hundreds of feet away. Zhou Xian looked at the sword in his hand in silence. He was crushed. This woman's strength was far above his. Even if he used the power of faith, he might not be able to do anything to this woman. The woman sized up Zhou Xian. 4 types of domains. It's quite rare. However, it's a pity that your 4 types of domains are of a low level. You haven't grasped the true essence of domains. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Low level. The woman nodded and smiled. You can't really think that domains are so trashy, right? Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment. Are domains very strong? The woman smiled. Of course. Although you have 4 types of domains, you haven't grasped the essence of domains. Therefore your power is mediocre. Zhou Xian said in a low voice. How can I display the true power of this domain? The woman blinked. Are you asking me? Yi Xian, the woman smiled. I won't tell you. Otherwise, if you're too strong, you'll only make things difficult for me. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Are you afraid that I'll become stronger? The woman smiled. If you want to be a threat to me, you'll need at least 30 years or even longer. Therefore, within 30 years, it doesn't matter how you jump around. However, I can't take the initiative to help you improve. Isn't that looking for trouble for myself? Yi Xian was silent. The woman smiled. Don't worry. I won't target the people around you. I won't use your relatives to threaten you. You can rest assured. Yi Xian glanced at the woman. In that case, I should be thanking you. The woman smiled. I can understand you. After all, it's a grudge of the older generation. You have to take the blame. But there's no other way. This matter has something to do with you. Moreover, I really can't beat the older generation. I can only beat you. Yi Xian looked calm. You're really straightforward. Speaking of which, I'm curious. Do you have some kind of blood feud with my mother? The woman smiled. Sort of. Yi Xian frowned. Your sisters. Is there such a big grudge? The woman shook her head. I can't tell you about this. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. He asked again. I heard from a senior that my grandfather was killed? The woman nodded. Yes. Yi Xian continued to ask. My father did it. The woman nodded. Your grandfather's death. I can only say that he deserved it. Although it's a bit unfilial to say this, he has done too many evil things. Moreover, when you were born, he wanted to kill you. Yi Xian was stunned. My grandfather wanted to kill me? The woman nodded. Yes. Yi Xian wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Damn it. It's not easy for me to live until now. The woman suddenly smiled. Let's go back. Yi Xian looked at the woman. Can we make an agreement? The woman smiled. Let's hear it. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. No matter what happens in the future, don't make a move on the fifth dimension. Don't make a move on the people around me. Of course, I won't make the fifth dimension and the people around you your enemy. This is a grudge between the two of us. What do you think? The woman smiled. Sure. However, I won't make a move on the fifth dimension. I won't show mercy to some people from the older generation who helped you. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. After saying that, he turned around and left. Not long after Yi Xian left, a shadow quietly appeared behind the woman. The shadow gradually solidified. It was a woman wearing an emerald green dress. There were some leaf-like things on the woman's head. It looked quite strange. The woman who had just appeared stared at Yi Xian at the end of the starry sky in the distance. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. The mysterious woman suddenly smiled. You can't just kill him like that. Do you understand? Moreover, what's the point of killing him? After all, the person you want to kill is Tianming. The woman in the emerald green dress was expressionless. If I kill him, that woman will definitely be in pain, right? The mysterious woman smiled. And then she will end you with a sword? Also, we can't kill him now. Don't underestimate that Miss Nian Nian. The woman in the emerald green dress was silent. The mysterious woman suddenly said, How's the contact going? The woman in the emerald green dress said solemnly, I've already contacted some people. However, most of them don't dare to participate in this matter because they fear Tianming. As she said that, she looked at the mysterious woman. How do you plan to deal with that man and that woman? The mysterious woman raised her head to look at the end of the starry sky and said softly, Our appearance is the best chance for this disaster cause. I don't believe it won't seize this opportunity. This disaster cause will definitely help us. If I'm not wrong, this disaster cause is about to make a move. In a certain part of the starry sky, a woman was walking slowly. It was the woman in the white dress. At that moment, the woman in the white dress suddenly stopped. The blood-red threads around her suddenly trembled violently. They surrounded the woman in the white dress like a huge ball, wrapping around her. However, it was very difficult for them to approach her. At the same time, the space in front of the woman suddenly turned blood-red. Within that blood-red space there was a blood-red door. The woman in the white dress slowly closed her eyes. After a long while, she turned her head to take a look and sneered. You're playing with me? If it weren't for the fact that you're his mother, I would have ended you with my sword long ago. You don't even recognize your own son. What the hell? After saying that, she walked towards the blood-red door. P.S. Updated 1 minute late, one more chapter. Chapter 1491. As the plain-dressed woman walked towards the blood-red door, the starry sky around her had already turned blood-red. The entire starry sky was like a sea of blood. It was extremely strange. The plain-dressed woman walked slowly. Her expression was calm as the number of blood-red threads around her increased. When she reached the blood-red door, those blood-red threads had already covered the entire starry sky. If someone was here, they would definitely be scared to death. This was too terrifying. Karmic threads. Endless karmic threads of disaster. These karmic threads of disaster should be on Zhou Xian's body. However, they had been shouldered by the plain-dressed woman. Of course, these karmic threads of disaster couldn't do anything to her. However, she couldn't sever them all because new threads would appear even if she severed them. Therefore, she didn't sever them all. The plain-dressed woman walked towards the blood-red door. Behind the door was a long blood-red path that seemed to have no end. When she entered the blood-red door, she suddenly turned her head to look at the karmic threads of disaster. She could see countless things from these karmic threads of disaster. Many of the karmic threads of disaster were related to her and the green-robed man. However, there were also some that didn't belong to her and the green-robed man. They belonged to Zhou Xian himself. The degree of terror of these karmic threads of disaster wasn't any less than the ones she and the green-robed man had. Everyone had a past life, present life, and a future life. However, when a person's strength reached a certain level, they could sever their past life and future life. The green-robed man had done it. He had also done it. She wouldn't be tainted by any karma. She would be herself. However, Zhou Xian couldn't do it. What was she really worried about? She was worried that Zhou Xian's past life would determine his present life. Some powerful people could be reborn after reaching a certain level. Moreover, they could control their own rebirth. After such people were reborn, they would gradually regain their past life's memories. If they were strong enough in their present life, they might be able to maintain their current state. However, if they weren't strong enough, they might become their past life's self. Was there a difference? There was definitely a difference. Because once the past life's memories were restored, the person at that time would no longer be him. The reason why Zhou Xian was still himself now was because she had blocked everything from his previous life. All the karmic threads from his previous life had basically landed on her. Of course, this was only her guess. She was not sure if it was Zhou Xian's doing in his previous life or if someone else was doing it or if he was doing it himself or if someone was helping him. Regardless of the reason, she was certain that Zhou Xian's identity was not simple. In fact, it was becoming more and more complicated. Before this, what gave her a headache was that the disaster cause had been lurking in the dark, leaving her powerless. But now, the cause of disaster could no longer hold back. When she thought up to here, the woman in a plain dress put away the wooden doll, and then she turned around to glance below. At this glance, she directly saw the mysterious woman from the hallowed grounds, and she had an expressionless face. A bunch of ants. If it wasn't for the fact that you're his mother, I would have killed you a long time ago. Are you even worthy of showing off your intelligence? After saying that, she entered the blood-red door. In fact, the mysterious woman from the hallowed grounds did not know that the woman in a plain dress wanted to make a move against the disaster cause even more than she did. If the disaster cause did not make a move and kept hiding, she really could not do anything to it. But if the disaster cause made a move and let her know where the disaster cause was, then it would be different. After the woman in a plain dress disappeared, the blood-red door in the starry sky slowly became illusory. After a while, it disappeared and the surrounding starry sky also returned to normal. In the hallowed grounds, the mysterious woman in the bamboo house suddenly raised her head. After being silent for a long time, she softly said, "No, they might not have gone far. We have to wait a little longer. We can't rush." After saying that, she lowered her head and continued to read the ancient book. At this moment, the sacred master's voice came from outside the door. "Master, the people from the desolate north have already gone to the fifth dimension." The woman nodded. "I know." The sacred master hesitated for a moment, then said, "Will the desolate north ally with the fifth dimension?" The woman shook her head. "They wouldn't dare." The sacred master was somewhat puzzled. "Why?" The woman smiled and said, "They won't want to get involved in this mess." The sacred master said in a deep voice, But if they know that this is a conspiracy of yours, master, the woman shook her head and smiled. As long as Zhou Xian absorbs those souls, it will be fine. Those souls are evil causes. Although I forced him to absorb them, he still benefited from it. As for the desolate north, the sacred envoy doesn't represent the entire desolate north. Moreover, as long as there are enough benefits, the desolate north will kill Zhou Xian. Although the sacred master still had some doubts in his heart, he didn't ask any more. Instead, he quietly retreated. Outside the bamboo forest, the sacred master sighed. He knew that his master must have some big plan. Recently, some extremely powerful auras appeared in the hallowed grounds. However, he didn't know who these people were and he didn't dare to ask. Zhou Xian returned to the fifth dimension. Somewhere in the cultivation room, Zhou Xian opened his right hand and slowly clenched it. In an instant, a powerful force condensed in his right hand. Life Fist. He had to admit that the power of this Life Fist was very powerful. However, he knew that even if he burned 1,000 years of his life, the Life Fist would not be able to do anything to that woman. Zhou Xian slowly loosened his right hand. This was the first time he felt so powerless. Although he had many enemies in the past and they were all powerful, they were completely incomparable to this mysterious woman. Now he felt that the woman was in control of everything. The biggest disadvantage was that the woman knew everything about him, while he didn't know much about her. As if he had thought of something, Zhou Xian suddenly opened his hands, and a mysterious force suddenly overflowed from his body. The power of faith. At this moment, his power of faith was unprecedentedly powerful. This was because it could be said that he had gathered the power of faith of the entire fifth dimension. Moreover, this power of faith was very pure. It could be said that this power of faith would increase his strength to an extremely terrifying level. However, his use of the power of faith was very simple and crude. That was to use it to forcibly increase his own strength. Domain. Zhou Xian suddenly displayed his sword domain. His sword domain directly enveloped the entire cultivation room. After the sword domain appeared, he crazily released his power of faith. Endless power of faith entered his sword domain. Excitement gradually appeared in Zhou Xian's eyes. Because he noticed that the sword domain was actually undergoing a transformation when the power of faith entered it. As if he'd thought of something, Zhou Xian suddenly said, "Condense." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword suddenly appeared in his hand. It was an illusory sword. It was a sword condensed from the power of faith he'd condensed. Zhou Xian held the sword in his hand and slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, his sword domain had undergone a tremendous transformation. The sword domain that was supported by the power of faith and the sword Dao was countless times stronger than his original sword domain. Moreover, he was able to increase the effects of the power of faith to its limits within this sword domain. Moreover, he could even utilize this sword domain to improve the might of his sword Dao. The power of faith could strengthen the sword domain, and the sword domain could strengthen his sword Dao. Zhou Xian clenched his fists tightly. He looked into the distance with the sword of faith in his hand. At this moment, he really wanted to slash out. The power of this sword would definitely destroy the world. However, this was the fifth dimension. Naturally, he couldn't use his sword. If he did, it would severely damage the origin of the fifth dimension. Zhou Xian put away his sword and continued to ponder the power of faith and sword domain. He originally wanted to rush to the consolidation realm. However, he felt that he should stabilize his current realm. After all, he just reached the Dao attainment realm not long ago. As for his physical body, it hadn't been long since he'd reached the consolidation realm. It would be very difficult to improve it again. Since he couldn't improve his realm and physical body, he would improve his sword Dao and sword domain. Especially the sword domain. He didn't know when it started, but he rarely used it. Against ordinary enemies, he didn't even need to use the sword domain. He could instantly kill them with one strike. However, against some enemies, the sword domain was completely useless. For example, against that mysterious woman, the sword domain was completely useless. And that woman's words made him understand that it wasn't that the sword domain was weak, but that he hadn't developed it yet. In the following time, Zhou Xian began to study the sword domain and the power of faith. Not only that, but he also studied the sword of instant death. With the blessing of the sword domain and the power of faith, the power of the sword of instant death could also be greatly enhanced. Especially in the space covered by the sword domain, the speed of the sword of instant death was already indescribable. It could be said that the speed was so fast that even he couldn't resist it. The power of faith and sword domain allowed Yi Xian to discover a new continent. In the blink of an eye, 1 month passed. During this month, Yi Xian hid in the cultivation room every day. As for the matters of the 5th dimension, he was relieved that Bai Dizzy and the others were handling it. Moreover, Bai Dizzy and the others didn't disturb him. Apart from cultivating, Yi Xian had been reading books for the past month. He read the ancient books that Nian Yan had collected. Not only that, he also asked Bai Dizzy to collect all the books related to the sword path in the 5th dimension, especially those from the sword sect. Just as the white-robed Qing'er said, his current sword path had reached its end. He could only walk the next path by himself. However, if he wanted to walk his own path, learning was indispensable. He wanted to improve his attainments in the sword Dao to the next level. During this time, there was no movement from the sacred domain. On this day, the sacred master came to the bamboo house. The sacred master glanced inside the bamboo house and saw that there were 2 women inside. The sacred master bowed slightly. "Master, that Yi Xian seems to be cultivating crazily." The mysterious woman said with a smile, "Let him be." The sacred master hesitated for a moment and then said, "Master, aren't you worried?" The mysterious woman said, "You can leave." The sacred master didn't dare to say anything else and immediately left. Inside the bamboo house, the mysterious woman looked at the woman in front of her. The woman was wearing an emerald green dress and there were a few broken leaves in her hair. The mysterious woman said with a smile, "Tree Boundless, you are too anxious." Tree Boundless' expression was cold. "She has already left. Are you still not going to act?" The mysterious woman shook her head. "Not enough, because I can still feel a trace of her aura." Tree Boundless suddenly asked, "What if she comes back?" The mysterious woman was silent. Tree Boundless looked at the woman. "You have thought about this problem, right?" The mysterious woman said softly, "She will not come back." Tree Boundless frowned slightly. "Why?" The mysterious woman said with a smile, "In her eyes, you and I are both ants." Chapter 1492. Ants. Tree Boundless was silent. How strong was that woman? She had personally experienced it. So strong that it made people feel despair. In this world, who could suppress the plain-dressed woman? No one. Even the green-robed man could only fight against the plain-dressed woman, but if the plain-dressed woman went crazy, the green-robed man could not stop her. In the eyes of that woman, apart from a few people, who was not an ant. In front of Tree Boundless, the mysterious woman suddenly smiled and said, "Of course, if she comes back, it is also a good thing." Tree Boundless looked at the mysterious woman and asked, "What do you mean?" The mysterious woman smiled and said, "The reason why Yi Xian can live so comfortably now is because she is at the front. If she returns to Yi Xian's side, who will be at the front? Of course, she can always stay by Yi Xian's side, but if she stays by Yi Xian's side, Yi Xian will never be able to grow. The path of the great Tao is walked by oneself. This is also the reason why she left Yi Xian, because she wants Yi Xian to grow on his own." Saying that, she shook her head and smiled. In her heart, the enemies of this universe, including us, are all Yi Xian's whetstones. Tree Boundless' expression was somewhat cold. "She is so confident." The mysterious woman said softly, "She is indeed very confident, but she has the strength." Saying that, she turned to look at the horizon. "I hope that the cause of disaster is not so weak. Otherwise, how can others play with it?" Tree Boundless asked, "In your opinion, does the cause of disaster have a chance of winning?" The mysterious woman nodded. "Yes." Tree Boundless asked, "Why do you think so?" The mysterious woman said softly, "That's because the 2 of them weren't able to stop this disaster cause back then. You have to understand that whether it's the azure-clothed man or the plain-dressed woman, they can only destroy but they can't create. This disaster cause is far, far too deep. Most importantly, if the source of this cause of disaster is Yi Xian himself, then this matter will be too interesting. At that time, should she kill or not? The reason why she hasn't forcefully cut off the cause of calamity on Yi Xian is also because of this." Tree Boundless asked solemnly, "What do you plan to do next?" The mysterious woman raised the teacup and took a light sip, and then she said softly, "Wait." Tree Boundless frowned. "How much longer do we have to wait?" The mysterious woman smiled and said, "We've waited for so many years. There's no need to rush, right?" Tree Boundless was silent. The mysterious woman suddenly asked, "How's the contact?" Tree Boundless said calmly, "Your seduction worked. More and more people join us. However, you have to remember one thing. If that woman or that man comes back, everything we've done will be meaningless." The mysterious woman nodded. Even if that man wanted to come back, he wouldn't be able to do so immediately. What we really need to be careful of is slaughtering them. Tree Boundless nodded. As long as that woman doesn't come back. At this point, she suddenly looked at the mysterious woman. "By the way, what level have you reached? Why can't I sense your realm?" The mysterious woman smiled slightly. "We're not enemies, you don't need to worry." Tree Boundless said calmly, "I'm just curious." The mysterious woman smiled and said, "A little higher than you think." Tree Boundless frowned slightly, but she didn't ask any more questions. At this time, the mysterious woman suddenly said, "We have to be careful of someone." Tree Boundless asked, "Who?" The mysterious woman dipped her finger into the tea and then wrote a name on the table. Tree Boundless frowned slightly. "He's here." The mysterious woman nodded. "He should be here." Tree Boundless said, "I'll deal with him." The mysterious woman smiled and said, "No, you have to deal with something else." Tree Boundless looked at the mysterious woman. "Tell me your plan." The mysterious woman said softly, "When that woman is a little further away, when I can't sense her, we'll make the disaster cause on Zhou Xian materialize. At that time, besides the 3 swords, whoever helps him will suffer the wrath of heaven." Tree Boundless said, "All right." Saying so, she stood up and left. The mysterious woman looked at the teacup in front of her, and after a long time she said softly, "Even if I'm an ant trying to shake a tree, I still want to try." Saying so, she took out a white silk handkerchief, and on the handkerchief there was a small footprint. Looking at the handkerchief in her hand, a trace of pain flashed in her eyes. "Why should you die?" "Why? Because he has an invincible little sister? Don't worry, I'll make him pay the price." Those were her son's footprints. However, she had never even seen her son's face. That was because the calamity had descended upon her, and her soul had almost been destroyed. When she had woken up, only one of her 2 children was left. No, at that time there was another person, and that was Tian Ming. After recalling the past, the killing intent in the mysterious woman's eyes became more and more ferocious. In the 5-dimensional universe, Zhou Xian didn't pay attention to the outside world, and every day he only focused on cultivating. The current him had perfectly fused the sword domain and the power of faith. The power of faith supported the sword domain, and the sword domain supported the way of the sword. With the perfect combination of the 2 powers, it could be said that his current sword domain was completely different from before. Apart from that, he had also developed the blood domain. The combination of bloodline power and the blood domain. He found that his bloodline power could greatly increase his blood domain, and it could make his blood reach a qualitative change. The most important thing in the blood domain was blood. Before this, he had actually neglected this problem. The blood domain, of course, needed blood. The only pity was that he couldn't activate the crazy demon bloodline, because the crazy demon bloodline's destructive power was stronger than the immortal bloodline. If the crazy demon bloodline was combined with the blood domain, the power of the blood domain would become even stronger. Apart from that, he found that when he used the blood domain, the more blood there was, the stronger the blood domain would become. In addition, the death domain needed death chi. A death domain with death chi and a death domain without death chi were 2 completely different domains. However, the power of the death domain couldn't be compared to the blood domain and the sword domain, because he didn't have too much death chi. Unless he killed too many people and used millions of yin spirits and death chi to stabilize the domain. However, this situation was very rare. As for the dark domain, he found that the power of the dark domain would be greatly enhanced in the shattered space. He could use all kinds of dark matter to strengthen the dark domain. It should be said that when he used the dark domain, he could use the dark domain to forcibly absorb all the dark matter energy in the surroundings. How much dark matter energy was there between heaven and earth? Especially in the starry sky, the dark matter energy could be said to be endless. In short, in the past month or so, Zhou Xian had gained a lot, especially in the use of the 4 domains. In this aspect, he had improved a lot. Now the 4 domains were no longer useless to him, but a great killer move. Inside the hall, Zhou Xian and Xianxia sat facing each other. During this period of time, Xianxia had always been with him, and the 2 of them were discussing. Moreover, he had already imparted life fist to Xianxia. What made him a little dumbfounded was that even if Xianxia didn't have a powerful body, she could still cultivate the life fist. However, her life fist was different from his. Moreover, she didn't burn her lifespan. Rather than saying that she cultivated the life fist, it would be better to say that she was drawing on the life fist. In this aspect of the martial Tao, Xianxia's talent was really too terrifying. Xianxia looked at Zhou Xian. You want to change the life fist into the life sword? Zhou Xian nodded. Yes. I had this idea a long time ago. The life fist's power is extremely strong. If it can be fused with my instant kill sword, then its power will definitely reach a very terrifying level. Xianxia said in a deep voice, difficult. Xianxia said in a deep voice, difficult. Zhou Xian smiled. I know. What was the instant kill sword particular about? It was speed and that instant of explosive force. The life fist was also particular about explosive force. If these two types of explosive force could be fused together, then the might would absolutely be able to destroy the heavens and the earth. However, this was extremely difficult because the might of the life fist was too great, and the speed and strength of the instant kill sword had reached a limit. This wasn't a combination of strength and softness, but a fusion of strength and strength. So the difficulty wasn't ordinary. Xianxia suddenly said, however, it isn't impossible. Zhou Xian looked at Xianxia. What do you mean? Xianxia looked at Zhou Xian. Domain. Zhou Xian was stunned when he heard this, and then he suddenly came to his senses. Right? I can use my domain to suppress these two forces and prevent them from going out of control. Xianxia nodded. Your faith energy combined with your sword domain should be able to suppress the formidable strength of these two martial techniques. Moreover, your body is sufficiently strong to be able to support these two forces. However, you have to pay attention to the problem after executing this sword strike. If you're directly paralyzed after executing this sword strike, then I feel that such a fusion wouldn't have much meaning. Moreover, after the fusion, if the speed of execution is unable to attain the speed of the instant kill sword, then it would be meaningless as well. Zhou Xian fell silent. He knew what Xianxia meant. No matter if it was researching domains or sword techniques, their imaginary enemy was that mysterious woman. Simply speaking, if he were to face the mysterious woman, then he only had the chance to execute a single sword strike. And this sword strike didn't just have to be swift, it had to be strong as well. In other words, the current speed of the instant kill sword wasn't sufficient. Not only was its speed insufficient, its strength was far from sufficient. Moreover, if he were to fuse the life fist with the instant kill sword, then even if his strength was sufficient, it would be useless if his speed wasn't sufficient. Because he might be killed by the mysterious woman at the instant he executed his sword strike. That woman wasn't stupid, and if she sensed danger, then she would absolutely not give him the chance to execute his sword strike. Xianxia said, you can give it a try now. Zhou Xian nodded. Enter the pagoda. As he spoke, he and Xianxia entered the world prison pagoda. Only by cultivating in the pagoda would he be able to satisfy that mysterious woman. Within the world prison pagoda, Zhou Xian stood silently, his right hand grasping the unparalleled sword. His lifespan began to burn, and at the instant he did so, a powerful force suddenly condensed in his right arm. The energy of lifespan. Zhou Xian slowly closed his eyes, continuing to burn his lifespan. In just a moment he had burned nearly 50 years of his lifespan, and at this moment, the sword in his hand began to tremble violently. Although he was constantly using the sword domain and faith energy to suppress it, this force was truly too strong and he found it difficult to control. After a long time, Zhou Xian suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Xianxia. I can't use my sword. Xianxia frowned. You can't use your sword? Zhou Xian nodded, his expression solemn. The force is too strong, it has already surpassed my control. Xianxia fell silent. Zhou Xian sighed softly, feeling slightly regretful, but he didn't intend to give up. If it was so easy to fuse, then it would be too much of a joke. Zhou Xian began to slowly release the force. He decided to make it simpler and not burn so much of his lifespan. He would do it bit by bit. Although this would consume a little of his lifespan, if he could fuse it, then it would absolutely be worth it. While Zhou Xian was cultivating, the space on the 9th floor suddenly trembled. Zhou Xian and Xianxia, who were cultivating, suddenly raised their heads to look at the 9th floor. In the next moment, the two of them appeared on the 9th floor, and in the 9th floor, space suddenly split open and a black object floated out. When they saw this object, Zhou Xian and Xianxia were stunned. Please praise me. Let me be lost in your praises. Chapter 1493. Pagoda. In front of the two of them was the Xiaota. This Xiaota was different from the world prison pagoda. This Xiaota was emitting a purple light, and this purple light was somewhat similar to his purple aura. Zhou Xian turned to look at Xianxia. Both of them had a trace of shock in their eyes. There was a Xiaota in this pagoda? What was this? At this moment that Xiaota floated in front of Zhou Xian. It bounced in front of Zhou Xian as if it was sizing up Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian hesitated and asked, "You are?" The Xiaota suddenly laughed. "Xiaota." Zhou Xian's mouth twitched. Damn, the Xiaota could speak. Xiaota suddenly said, "You seem to be very confused?" Zhou Xian sized up Xiaota. "You are?" Xiaota laughed. "I am Xiaota." Zhou Xian's expression froze. This motherf asterisk cur. At this moment Xiaota suddenly swayed from side to side as if it was very happy. Zhou Xian asked, "Xiaota, why are you in this pagoda?" Xiaota floated in front of Zhou Xian and said with a smile, "Master placed me here saying that I should assist you." Zhou Xian blinked. "Assist me?" Xiaota nodded, "Yes." Zhou Xian was a little confused. "Who is your master?" Xiaota said, "My master is my master." Zhou Xian held his forehead. He was having a headache. At this moment Xianxia suddenly asked, "What is your master called?" Xiaota laughed. "You want to know my master's identity?" Zhou Xian nodded, "Yes." Xiaota suddenly bounced. "Is there any benefit?" "Benefits?" Zhou Xian and Xianxia were both stunned. This pagoda wanted benefits? Xiaota suddenly said, "Of course there must be benefits. Why should I tell you if I won't give you any benefits?" Zhou Xian said solemnly, "Didn't I ask you to assist me?" Xiaota stopped. "Who said that?" Zhou Xian stared at Xiaota. "You said it yourself." Xiaota quickly shook his head. "No. I never said that. You must have heard wrong." Zhou Xian was dumbfounded. Damn it, this guy actually didn't want to admit it? And Xianxia's expression was also somewhat odd. Why was this Xiaota so flowery? Zhou Xian suddenly asked, "What benefits do you want?" Xiaota chuckled. "I don't know either. You decide. As long as I like it, it's fine." Zhou Xian thought for a moment, then said with a smile, "I feel that you definitely won't be interested in ordinary treasures, right?" Small Tower hurriedly nodded. "Of course you can't use trash to trick me. Let me tell you, I know several hundred ways to trick people. Trying to trick me in front of me, you will only be asking to be humiliated." Zhou Xian. At this moment, a sword suddenly flew in front of Zhou Xian. Sword Spirit. Zhou Xian was just about to speak when Sword Spirit directly slashed at Xiaota. Bang! Xiaota trembled violently and directly jumped out. Zhou Xian. In the distance Xiaota wailed, "Wow, Sister Sword Spirit, you're here too." The Sword Spirit flew back in front of Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian opened his palm and the Sword Spirit landed in his hand. In the distance Xiaota was shivering. Zhou Xian glanced at Xiaota. This Xiaota was afraid of the Sword Spirit. Zhou Xian held his sword and walked in front of Xiaota. Xiaota hurriedly said, "Don't mess around. Violence is useless. Let's talk this out." The corner of Zhou Xian's mouth twitched. This guy was quite flexible. Zhou Xian, he smiled and said, "I won't mess around. Like, I want to ask you some questions. Can you answer me?" Xiaota was silent. The little friend suddenly held the sword and lightly patted his palm. At this moment Xiaota hurriedly said, "Master is Sister Sword Spirit's master." Zhou Xian was slightly stunned. He looked at the sword in his hand and understood. This Xiaota's master was the green-robed man. The green-robed man left for him was Xiaota? Zhou Xian collected his thoughts and continued to ask, "Your master left you for me?" Xiaota nodded but quickly shook his head. The corner of Zhou Xian's mouth twitched. "What do you mean?" Pagoda stuttered. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "If you want to leave, I won't stop you." Xiaota suddenly jumped up. "Really?" Zhou Xian nodded. Xiaota turned and ran. Zhou Xian. At this moment a sword suddenly blocked in front of him. It was the Sword Spirit. The Sword Spirit fiercely slashed at Xiaota. Xiaota hurriedly dodged and begged, "Sister Sword Spirit, don't hit me. Don't hit me. I won't leave. I really won't leave. I will be honest." Zhou Xian. After slashing for a long time, the sword spirit stopped. Xiaota hid in a corner and looked a little pitiful. Xian smiled and said, "Can we have a good talk?" Xiaota felt a little wronged and said, "You asked me to leave. I didn't leave on my own." Xian shook his head and smiled. "What did your master leave you for me to do?" Xiaota said, "To help you." Xian frowned slightly. "To help me?" Xiaota nodded. "Yes." Xian was a little curious. "What can you help me with?" Xiaota suddenly jumped up. "I can help you a lot." Xian asked, "For example?" Xiaota was speechless. Xian shook his head and smiled. "It seems that you are a mascot. You can play by yourself. We are leaving." After saying that, he and Xianxia were about to leave. At this moment, Xiaota suddenly trembled. In the next moment, countless purple qi appeared in the tower. Xian was stunned. He glanced at the purple qi and was a little shocked. This purple qi was so pure. At this moment, Xiaota suddenly said, "This is primordial purple qi. It is only inferior to Little White's purple qi. If you use my purple qi to cultivate, your cultivation speed can increase by more than several times. In addition, my purple qi also has a powerful recovery ability." Xian and Xianxia looked at each other. Both of their eyes were filled with shock. This purple qi was not ordinary purple qi. If they used it to cultivate, it shouldn't be difficult for them to reach the consolidation realm. At this moment, Xiaota said again, "I still have some treasures." Xian hurriedly asked, "What treasures?" Xiaota jumped up and down. He was very proud. Many treasures. He. Xian. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, "Can you take it out for me to see?" Xiaota hurriedly shook his head. "I should not show my wealth. If I take it out, you will be thinking about it." Xian was a little speechless. "Aren't we on the same side? Why are you still guarding against us?" Xiaota said, "Even blood brothers should settle accounts clearly." Xian, Xiaota suddenly said, "Your strength is a little weak. I suggest you increase your strength. Otherwise, you will be in great danger." Xian frowned slightly. "Danger?" Xiaota nodded. "I can feel that something bad is about to happen. You better increase your strength quickly. Increase your strength." Xian fell silent. Could it be that woman is about to make a move? During this period of time, that woman has not made a move. This is very abnormal. At this moment, Xiaota suddenly said, "Can I go out and play?" Xian glanced at Xiaota. Xiaota giggled. "I won't run around. I will come back after playing for a while." As he said this, an ancient book suddenly floated in front of Xian. Xian asked, "This is?" Xiaota hurriedly said, "Sword drawing technique. This is the sword drawing technique that master improved. Take it and cultivate." Sword drawing technique. Xian took the ancient book. He opened it and very quickly his expression became solemn. This sword drawing technique was very different from the one that the green-clothed man gave him. Xian kept the ancient book and looked at Xiaota. "Go and play." Xiaota suddenly cheered. He directly turned into a purple light and disappeared in the prison pagoda. Inside the prison pagoda, Xian looked at the ancient book in front of him and said softly, "This sword skill is suitable for frontal attacks. Moreover, this sword skill focuses on breaking the surface with a single point. It has the meaning of, one sword breaks 10,000 techniques. Can be used for both offense and defense." And Xianxia said, "You should first fuse your instant death sword with life fist." Xian nodded. He still wanted to fuse life fist with instant death sword first. As for this sword drawing technique, it is not that difficult to cultivate. He can temporarily take it slow. In the following time, Xian began to study the instant death sword and life fist. And Xianxia did not leave and continued to help in the pagoda. As for that Xiaota, Xian was particularly speechless towards this Xiaota, because this Xiaota has already gone somewhere. But fortunately, the sword spirit chased after him. Northern Wilderness. In front of the stone tablet, the divine envoy sat cross-legged on the ground. Behind her were Guyao and the others. At this moment there are more people than before. There are more than 100 people. The aura of these people, including themselves, is much stronger than before. Obviously, the long period of hibernation has caused their strength to decline. Now their strength is slowly recovering to the peak. At this moment, the divine envoy suddenly opened her eyes. A woman suddenly appeared in front of her. It is the mysterious woman from the sacred ground. Seeing the mysterious woman, Gu Yao and the others behind the divine envoy suddenly became gloomy. It is this woman again. The mysterious woman looked at the divine envoy and said with a smile, "We meet again." The divine envoy asked, "What is it?" The mysterious woman nodded, "I want to talk to you about a great opportunity. I wonder if you are interested?" The divine envoy said, "Cooperate with you to deal with that young Zhou Xian?" The mysterious woman said with a smile, "Smart. You guessed it right." The divine envoy shook her head. "That young man is not simple. The people behind him are not simple either. We will not cooperate with you." The mysterious woman blinked. "Can you represent the entire northern wilderness?" The divine envoy said, "How I can." Saying so, she looked at the mysterious woman. "We will not be used by you." The mysterious woman said with a smile, "That is because there are not enough benefits." The divine envoy frowned. "Even if you give us benefits, we will not team up with you." The mysterious woman smirked. "That may not be true." Saying so, she opened her palm and a black box appeared in her hand. She opened the box. When she saw the item in the black box, her eyes suddenly narrowed. "You?" The mysterious woman smiled and did not speak. Instead, she turned to look at the stone tablet not far away. At this moment, a voice came from the stone tablet. "We can talk." Chapter 1494. Let's talk. Hearing the voice, the mysterious woman smiled. "Then let's talk." Not far away, the holy messenger was silent. Her gaze was fixed on the box in the mysterious woman's hand. At this moment, her heart was like a raging storm and she was extremely shocked. A voice came from the stone tablet. "How did you get this item?" The mysterious woman blinked and smiled. "I picked it up." The voice from the stone tablet fell silent. "Picked it up?" No one believed it. The mysterious woman suddenly smiled. "I don't like to talk nonsense, so I'll be straightforward. You guys help me deal with Zhou Xian. To be exact, you just need to help me stall 3 people. Once you stall them, this thing will be yours." The voice from the stone tablet said, "That young man's background is not simple." The mysterious woman smiled. "I'm not simple either." The voice was silent. The mysterious woman smiled. "Take your time to think about it." Then she turned and left. The voice from the stone tablet suddenly said, "I agree." The mysterious woman smiled. "Wait for my notice." After saying that, she disappeared. The saint walked to the stone tablet and whispered, "Supreme Goddess, that young man has the constitution of adversity. He's not simple." The voice from the stone tablet said again, "That's the Black Heaven and Earth Temple. We can't refuse her." The saint fell silent. The Black Heaven and Earth Temple. The #1 treasure of the prehistoric era. The true #1 treasure came from before the birth of this universe. It was an artifact but not an artifact. It existed forever and was indestructible. There were 6 ancient characters inside: Tao, life, death, kindness, evil, and calamity. Apart from that, the #1 treasure of the Northern Wilderness tribe, the Northern Wilderness martial scripture, came from the Black Heaven and Earth Temple. There were countless secrets in the Black Heaven and Earth Temple. The Black Heaven and Earth Temple might contain an unknown era's inheritance, civilization, and treasures. The Black Heaven and Earth Temple used to be in the hands of the Northern Wilderness tribe. But then the prehistoric era changed and the item disappeared. But now it had appeared again. The saint asked softly, "Why is that item in her hands?" The Supreme Goddess said, "I don't know. However, based on the current situation, she probably doesn't know exactly what this item is. Otherwise, she would definitely not use this item to make a trade." The saint envoy said in a low voice, "Exalted deity, it's not normal for this woman to have this item. Moreover, that young man Zhou Xian has a special background. If our clan becomes enemies with him, then I'm afraid we'll be tainted with some bad karma, and it might even bring about a calamity to our clan." The supreme deity in the stone tablet was silent. The divine envoy continued, "The temple of heaven and earth is naturally important to our tribe. However, have you ever thought about how powerful and intelligent this woman is? She is trying to sow discord and use all kinds of tricks to make us become enemies with that young Master Yi. What does this mean?" It meant that she was afraid of the person behind that young man. "I've also investigated this person." There's an extremely powerful expert following her, and there are also several mysterious women behind her. These people are not simple. Then she looked at the stone tablet. This woman wants us to be cannon fodder. Inside the stone tablet, the great deity suddenly said, I want to see this person. The divine envoy said, should I invite him? The exalted deity said, there's no need, I'll meet him personally. The divine envoy was stunned for a moment before nodding. All right. Sacred ground inside the bamboo house. After the mysterious woman returned to the bamboo house, she placed the black box on the bamboo table. In front of the mysterious woman was Tree Boundless. Tree Boundless looked at the black box. Does the northern wilderness care about this box? The mysterious woman smiled. They care about the item inside the box. Tree Boundless asked, what is it? The mysterious woman smiled. A very ancient item. Tree Boundless looked at the mysterious woman. You're not interested? The mysterious woman shook her head. At my level, other treasures or martial arts inheritances are no longer attractive to me. Tree Boundless looked at the black box curiously. How did you get this item? The mysterious woman smiled. That little white guy touched it and I traded it for 2 candied haws. Hearing that, Tree Boundless' expression turned strange. That little white guy. Of course, she knew who the mysterious woman was talking about. She knew that the little white guy was playful and gluttonous, but she did not expect that he would sell such a precious item for 2 candied haws. What a wastrel. Tree Boundless shook his head. Suddenly, the mysterious woman said, I'm going out for a while. Tree Boundless looked at the mysterious woman. Are you going to make a move? The mysterious woman shook her head. Wait until that woman is far away. Tree Boundless nodded. That's true. If that woman came back, everything they had done would be for naught. No one could stop that woman head-on. As if thinking of something, Tree Boundless suddenly asked, Zhou Xian seems to be cultivating. The mysterious woman smiled. Let him cultivate. After all, we don't have much time left. She put away the black box and left. Tree Boundless suddenly asked, do you look down on him that much? The mysterious woman stopped and shook her head. It's not that I look down on him. On the contrary, I admire him. Among my peers, there are not many who can compare to him. But we are from the same generation as his father. If we can't even beat him, then we have lived all these years in vain. Having said that, she opened the bamboo door and walked out. Inside the hall, Tree Boundless was silent. That era. At that moment she thought of that woman again. That woman in a plain dress. That woman who had suppressed countless eras. In front of that woman, countless giants of the past paled in fear. In the 5-dimensional universe. Inside the world prison pagoda, Zhou Xian sat on the 9th floor. His eyes were closed and his sword domain enveloped the entire world prison pagoda. In front of him was the unparalleled sword. After an unknown amount of time, Zhou Xian once again grasped the unparalleled sword. Bang! A powerful force suddenly shook the pagoda, causing the surrounding walls to tremble. Zhou Xian tightly gripped the unparalleled sword. Within his right hand was an endless amount of lifespan. This time he burned 50 years of his lifespan. Zhou Xian stared at the unparalleled sword in his hand. Although the sword domain was suppressing him, the power contained within the sword was too great. At this moment the 9th floor was shaking violently. If not for the Tao laws suppressing him, this pagoda would not have been able to withstand his current strength. His current strength was already a bit abnormal. On the side, and Xianxia looked at Zhou Xian. Can you use the sword? Zhou Xian nodded. I can now. As he spoke, he slowly raised the unparalleled sword. This sword, he could swing it. However, the speed was not enough. The power of this sword far exceeded the power of the instant death sword. It could be said to be several times more powerful. However, the speed was definitely not as fast as the instant death sword. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, there are pros and cons. Zhou Xian nodded. The power and speed of the instant death sword had actually reached the limit of his physical body. If the instant death sword fused with his life fist, unless his physical body reached the god realm, it would be very difficult for him to increase his speed. Zhou Xian sighed softly and began to slowly release the power within the sword. During this period of time, in order to fuse the life fist with the instant death sword, he had burned more than 200 years of his lifespan. However, he still could not achieve his ideal state. This was because the unparalleled sword could no longer increase his speed. This meant that he had truly reached his own limit. On the other hand, without that speed, this sword of his would absolutely not be able to pose any threat to that woman. She wouldn't just stand there and let him slash her. Meanwhile, Xianxia spoke in a light voice, "Just do your best." Xian gazed at Xianxia and smiled. "Right? Just do your best. If you really can't defeat her, then it can't be helped." Xianxia nodded. "This sword of yours has no chance of winning against that woman. However, there aren't many in this world that can withstand this sword of yours." The might of the life fist combined with the instant death sword was extraordinarily terrifying when two explosive martial techniques were fused. Xian nodded. He glanced at the unparalleled sword in his hand and said, "This new sword technique shall be called the life sword." The life sword. A sword strike that burned one's lifespan. Xian put the unparalleled sword away, and then he withdrew the ancient scroll that Xiaota had given him. The sword drawing technique. Xian flipped open the scroll and he gazed at it for a long time before he spoke in a light voice. "What an amazing sword drawing technique." Xianxia walked over to Xian, glanced at it and said softly, "It really is extraordinary." Xian shook his head and laughed bitterly. "I think I need to consolidate my strength for a while. I've been busy dealing with those enemies every single day and I've neglected my own sword Dao." His sword Dao hadn't improved in a very, very long time. His improvement was mainly in the aspect of his body, and he'd relied on external forces to improve his body. As for his sword Dao, it had stagnated for a very long time. Moreover, no one could help him in his future path of the sword Dao. Because he'd already walked his own path, and what he had to do now was continue walking down it and not stay where he was. At this moment he recalled what the white-robed Qing'er had said. The unrestrained sword heart. Actually, he'd always been unable to truly attain the unrestrained sword heart because there were truly too many restraints in his heart. In the beginning it was only Ling, then it was Big Sister Nian, and now it was the entire fifth dimension. There were more and more restraints, and they were the kind that couldn't be cut off. As for the swordsman's sword, the fewer restraints there were, the faster and sharper his sword would be. As he thought of this, Xian's brows suddenly furrowed. Was this really the case? A person must have faith in life. What was his faith? It was to protect the people by his side. Responsibility. If a man couldn't shoulder his responsibilities, could he still be considered a man? Restraints. To him, the entire fifth dimension was indeed a restraint, but it was also Xian's responsibility. Since it was his responsibility, how could he talk about restraints? Being heartless and giving up everything, could he really attain the unrestrained sword heart? Perhaps he could, but for Xian it was impossible. It was like a person abandoning his parents, wife and children. This kind of person was indeed very free, because he didn't have any burdens. He was alone and free. However, this kind of freedom wasn't what Xian wanted. To him, what was the use of a sword? It wasn't to seek invincibility. Instead, it was to protect. As he thought of this, many people suddenly appeared in Xian's mind. Yiling and Lanxiu Lian Wanli Toba Yen Shaoqi Shaodao Arrow Mo Yunqi Shaoqi everything in the fifth dimension, and Sister Nian. Scenes of the past flashed through Xian's mind like lightning. There were all kinds of ups and downs. After a long time, Xian suddenly looked at the sword in his hand and smiled. "Qing'er, I understand what you mean by the unrestrained sword heart. The unrestrained sword heart doesn't mean abandoning everything, it doesn't mean being heartless or selfish. The unrestrained sword heart means doing things with a clear conscience, being a person with a clear conscience and being free with a clear conscience." As he thought of this, the unparalleled sword in his hand suddenly trembled, and the sword's cry never stopped. Not only that, at this moment all the swords in Xian's body trembled, even the sword at the top of the pagoda trembled slightly as if responding. "P.S. Give me a ticket if you have one. 1 monthly ticket isn't much, you can't go to Singapore, 1 monthly ticket is nothing, anyone can afford it." Chapter 1495. Inside the pagoda, Xian's eyes were closed. At that moment he had entered a very strange state. Relaxed. He suddenly felt extremely relaxed. This was a feeling that he had never felt before. In the past it was as if he had been imprisoned by shackles. There were shackles on his heart and thoughts, but now those 2 shackles were gone. His thoughts were clear and he felt unprecedentedly relaxed. At that moment, Xianxia suddenly asked, "Did you break through?" Yi Xian opened his eyes and smiled. "No, but I understand what true freedom is." As he said that, he looked at the supreme sword in his hand and chuckled. "Previously, I was always shackled by myself and my sword was also shackled by me. But it won't happen in the future." The supreme sword in Yi Xian's hand was still trembling as if it was responding. This sword originally did not have a spirit and it was just a sword. Of course, this sword was very special. After all, it came from the Milky Way realm. But now this sword had a spirit of its own. Yi Xian had bestowed it with a spirit of its own. The sword was extraordinary because of its master. The current Yi Xian already had the ability to change the sword. The breakthrough in his state of mind made Yi Xian look different. Previously he was like a sword shackled by a scabbard. Although he was reserved, his hands and feet were tied, and he did not have the kind of momentum that could destroy thousands of enemies with one sword. But now he was like an unsheathed sword. Not only did he show off his sharpness, but he also had a domineering sword aura that made people feel intimidated. At that moment, Xianxia felt that Yi Xian was a swordsman. In fact, although Yi Xian was a swordsman, his combat strength was previously dependent on the power of his bloodline, his physical body, and the power of faith. It could be said that the reason why his combat strength was so strong was not because of his sword Dao. Apart from these few things, his combat strength was really not that great. Especially when he did not have a Dao body, his combat strength could be said to be greatly reduced. Could he easily kill a godly state powerhouse by relying on sword Dao alone? Of course not. Moreover, without the Dao physique he could at most fight 1 or 2 God state experts, but if he had the Dao physique even 10 God state experts wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Rather than a swordsman, it would be more accurate to say that he was a physique cultivator. Moreover, even though he'd taken a new path in the Dao of the sword, he hadn't taken it well. Because he hadn't gone far on this new path and he'd remained stagnant. Now that he was enlightened, he was finally like a real swordsman. Confidence in the way of the sword. Of course, this was only the beginning. Yi Xian looked at the supreme sword in his hand and said with a smile, "This feeling is very wonderful. It's like the feeling when I first learned the sword." Xianxia suddenly said, "Congratulations." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "My path of the sword Dao is still very long." Although his mental state had broken through, he couldn't be arrogant at all. Why? Because there were too many formidable swordsmen by his side. Not to mention Qing'er and the green-clothed man, he couldn't even compare to Ting Yun now. There was also Big Sister Nian, and Big Sister Nian was a formidable swordsman as well. Xianxia suddenly said, "Try executing the insta-kill sword now." Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. "Let's go somewhere else." Xianxia nodded. Both of them directly vanished within the pagoda, and it wasn't long before they arrived in a deathly silent starry sky. The two of them were 300 m apart. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. "Watch out." At the instant he finished speaking, a strand of sword light suddenly arrived between Xianxia's brows. However, a spear had suddenly been pressed against Yi Xian's chest. In the distance, Xianxia shook her head. "I've lost." She was unable to resist this strike of Yi Xian's. Even though her spear was extremely swift, but Yi Xian had an advantage over her. Xian had an advantage over her, and that was her Taoist physique. Yi Xian's sword was able to kill her, but her spear was unable to kill Yi Xian. Compared to before, Yi Xian's sword had already undergone a tremendous change. If he utilized external forces like the energy of faith, then she would be even more unable to fight him. Yi Xian looked at the sword in his hand. His current insta-kill sword was too much faster than before. Most importantly, its might was much stronger than before as well. The breakthrough in his mental state this time had brought about a tremendous change to his sword Dao. At this moment he finally felt that he was a swordsman and not a body refiner. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xianxia. "I'll defend if you attack me." As he spoke, he took out a sword sheath and placed the supreme sword into it. Xianxia understood what Yi Xian meant and she immediately nodded. "Alright." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly vanished on the spot, and a speck of cold light appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Sword drawing technique. An expanse of sword light suddenly erupted in front of Yi Xian, and that speck of cold light was instantly drowned out by this expanse of sword light. But in the next moment, that expanse of sword light was directly shattered. Bang! Yi Xian directly retreated explosively by 300 m. After he stopped, Yi Xian looked at Enlancio. His sword drawing technique utilized a single point to break through, whereas Enlancio's spear strike utilized a single point to break through, and he hadn't gone all out. Yi Xian looked at Enlancio. Enlancio nodded, and then she tapped the tip of her foot lightly. In the next moment, an afterimage flashed to arrive before Yi Xian. Yi Xian held the hilt of his sword with his right hand, and then he suddenly drew it. A sword howl shook the heavens and the earth. His sword descended. Rumble. Along with an explosion, Yi Xian's sword light was directly shattered. This time Yi Xian retreated by over 1 kilometer. After he stopped, Yi Xian gazed at the sword in his hand and went silent. Enlancio didn't attack again. After a long time, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I know what the problem is. Imposing aura." As he spoke, his eyes slowly closed. Imposing aura. A person's imposing aura was extremely important, and his sword-drawing technique lacked precisely such an imposing aura. In the past, he'd seen the green-clothed man execute this sword technique, and that time was in the world below. When the green-clothed man executed this sword technique, that strike seemed as if it intended to slash the heavens apart. When he thought of imposing aura, he thought of Qing'er's life and death decided with a single strike. Death is inevitable with this strike of mine. This sort of imposing aura was what he lacked the most. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian looked at Enlancio. But in next to no time he became slightly helpless. He wanted to be more ruthless, but how could he be ruthless towards Enlancio? Should I slash him to death with this strike of mine? Towards Enlancio he seriously couldn't do it. Actually, Enlancio didn't have that sort of killing aura when she attacked him with her spear either. On the contrary, she still held back strength and didn't dare to use her full strength. Two people sparring had advantages and disadvantages. Seeming to have thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Come, I'll bring you to find someone." Finished talking, he directly brought Enlancio along and vanished in the starry sky. Before long, the two people arrived at the Dao door again. The person who received Yi Xian and Enlancio was an old man. When he saw Yi Xian, that old man had a slight headache because the person who received Yi Xian the last time was him. Yi Xian looked at the old man and said with a smile, "Please inform Third Miss that I have something to look for her about." The old man hesitated and was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "You want to say that Third Miss isn't here, right?" The old man was speechless. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Go tell Third Miss that I'm here. Yi Xian won't make it difficult for her." The old man was still hesitant. Right at this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Enlancio. It was the Third Miss. The Third Miss looked at Yi Xian. "How annoying." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Third Miss, I trust you've been well since we last met." The Third Miss said indifferently, "Is something the matter?" Yi Xian cupped his fists and said, "I hope Third Miss can help me with something." The Third Miss said, "What is it?" Yi Xian said, "Hit me." Enlancio was very strong, but she couldn't bring herself to be ruthless, and he similarly couldn't bring himself to be ruthless towards Enlancio. Moreover, if both of them showed mercy during sparring, then what was the point of sparring? So he wanted to find someone who could beat him up. Only in this way would he be able to find out where he was lacking. The Third Miss looked at Yi Xian. "You want to spar with me?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The Third Miss was silent. Yi Xian asked, "Can I?" The Third Miss glanced at Yi Xian. "Why do you suddenly want to spar with me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I just want to improve myself." The Third Miss nodded, "Okay." Yi Xian blinked, "You agree?" The Third Miss said, "Spar with me. Come with me." Saying that, she turned and left. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then followed the Third Mississippi. Soon the Third Miss brought Yi Xian to an empty square. Around this square, there were all kinds of array formations stabilizing the space. The Third Miss looked at Yi Xian. "How do you want to spar?" Yi Xian said, "Hit me." Before he could finish his words, the distant third young lady suddenly disappeared. Before Yi Xian could react, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Then his whole body flew backward and finally hit the space barrier. The entire trial square suddenly shook violently. Enlancio, in the distance, Yi Xian looked a little pained because he felt like his body was falling apart. When did his Dao body become so weak? At this moment, the Third Miss suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was stunned. He was about to speak when the Third Miss suddenly punched his head. Bang! Yi Xian's whole body directly hit the ground and slid hundreds of feet away. The moment he stopped, he felt dizzy as if he was going to faint. At this moment, the third miss suddenly appeared in front of him again. Before he could react, the third miss directly grabbed one of his legs and lifted him up. Then she slammed him into the ground. Boom! The ground directly collapsed, turning into a huge pit. But it was not over yet. The third miss suddenly kicked Yi Xian's abdomen. Bang! Yi Xian instantly flew more than 100 feet away. Before he landed, the third miss appeared in front of him again and then flew up and kicked him in the abdomen. Bang! Yi Xian directly flew out and hit the space barrier in the distance. Boom! The surrounding space barrier directly cracked. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the third miss appeared in front of him again. Then she directly grabbed one of Yi Xian's legs and slammed it on the ground. Bang 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 bang. Deep pits directly appeared in the surrounding ground. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly wailed. Stop! Stop! The third miss said while hitting him. What? Don't stop? Use force. Okay, I will use force. Bang 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 bang. Yi Xian. Chapter 1496. Just like that, Yi Xian was beaten for nearly half an hour before he stopped. During this period, Yi Xian tried to resist. But it was useless. The more he resisted, the worse he was beaten. Every time he wanted to use his sword, it was useless because as soon as the sword appeared, he would be beaten even worse. The main reason was that he was beaten silly from the beginning. And his Dao body seemed to be useless in front of the third young lady. After the third young lady stopped, she walked to the side, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. It was really comfortable. In fact, she had wanted to beat this guy for a long time. But there was no chance. But she didn't expect that this guy would come to her and ask her to beat him. How could she refuse such a good thing? In the distance, Yi Xian climbed up and looked at the third young lady in the distance. The third young lady turned to look at Yi Xian and said seriously, "How do you feel?" Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Third young lady, did you just want to beat me?" The third young lady sneered. "You actually thought that I just wanted to beat you?" Yi Xian glanced at the third young lady. "Isn't that the case?" The third young lady walked in front of Yi Xian. "Of course not. The reason why I beat you was to let you understand your current shortcomings. Moreover, you asked me to beat you, you asked me to." Saying that, she pointed to the distant Xianxia. "She can testify." Xianxia. Yi Xian shook his head. He had fallen for this woman's trick. The third young lady suddenly said, "What do you think now?" Yi Xian said lightly, "I thought is to be careful of women." The third young lady, as if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Third young lady, why is my Dao body so vulnerable in front of you?" The third young lady smiled, "Because I also cultivate Dao body. And let me tell you, Dao body doesn't mean invincible. When a person is too strong, they can directly destroy your body. Of course, your physical body is a little special because you have a powerful bloodline. The recovery ability of your bloodline is too abnormal." Although Yi Xian had just been beaten up, his body had more or less recovered, which made her rather depressed. "Third young lady, how strong are you?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. He suddenly realized that the woman in front of him was much, much stronger than he had imagined. Even though he hadn't truly fought with his life on the line just now, and he would still be able to fight back if he utilized the sword domain and faith energy. However, he noticed that the three of them hadn't attacked him with the intent to kill. Moreover, he wanted to see if he could resist them without utilizing external forces. The outcome was that he couldn't. The third young lady laughed. "I'm not that strong. I just started cultivating earlier than you." Yi Xian shook his head. "You're too humble." The third young lady smiled. "Unless you have invincible strength, you have to be humble. Being humble will help you live longer." Yi Xian said solemnly. Sister Nian said the same thing. The third young lady laughed. "Fifth dimension Tendo?" Yi Xian nodded his head. The third young lady whispered, "She is an amazing person." Yi Xian smiled. "You know Sister Nian?" The third young lady nodded. "I have investigated her. She is a person of faith. And she was willing to seal her strength for your fifth dimension. She is worthy of respect. Of course, you are also not bad. At least she didn't misjudge you." Yi Xian smiled and then said, "Third young lady, to be honest, there is one thing that I don't understand. You, Dao Lauer and Dao Lauer are all disciples of the Taoist sect's grand ancestor. So why is there such a big gap between you?" He discovered that the difference in IQ between second young Dao and the third young lady was like heaven and earth. The third young lady shook her head. Second senior brother was also very outstanding. He was able to use Master's Dao scripture to create the dark scripture, which proved his talent. It was power that harmed him. After Master left, the Dao faction was like a group of dragons without a leader. At that time, the Dao faction was the #1 force in the universe. Second senior brother and eldest senior brother were fighting for the position of Dao faction's master. Therefore, the two of them directly fought for this position and the great Dao spirit. Unfortunately, the great Dao spirit did not choose either of them. At this point, she sighed. At that time, I should have stood up. If I had fought, they would not have been able to compete with me. But I really have no interest in the position of Dao faction's master. Xian shook his head and smiled. Third young lady, you have no interest in the position of Dao faction's master, but in the end, you became the Dao faction's master. This life. The third young lady laughed. Young Master Yi, you also don't seem to have any interest in the master of the fifth dimension. Xian nodded. However, I will not let go of the fifth dimension. The third young lady chuckled. This is where I am inferior to you. I was a little selfish at that time. I only wanted to live according to my own ideas. Although this is not wrong, I should not let go of the responsibility that I should bear. Xian suddenly asked, do you have an eldest senior brother? The third young lady nodded. I contacted him. He is no longer interested in the position of Dao faction's master. Xian said in a deep voice. Third young lady, you are so strong but you still can't beat that woman? The third young lady looked at Xian. You know? Xian nodded. I know. The third young lady chuckled. The reason why you think I am strong now is because you are still a little weak. Remember, in this world there is no strongest, only stronger. Xian said, I want to kill her. The third young lady stared at Xian. Are you serious? Xian nodded. The third young lady fell into silence. Xian said, do you think it's impossible? The third young lady said softly, Young Master Yi, you are a genius. Among the younger generation there are very few who are better than you. But do you know who you are going to face? She is not from the same generation as you. She has cultivated for tens of thousands of years more than you. Do you know how difficult it is to jump levels and challenge her? Xian smiled. But I can't just wait for death, right? The third young lady nodded. Indeed. Saying that, she sighed softly. Forget it. I don't need to worry about the matters between you two. Since you came to me to spar, let's start now. Xian cupped his fists. Thank you. The third young lady looked at Xian. Make your move against me. Xian said in a deep voice. Third young lady, I will do my best. The third young lady smiled. Come on. Don't worry, I won't be careless. Xian nodded. The next moment he suddenly struck with his sword. Instant kill. This sword was fast to the extreme, but it was still caught by 2 fingers. The third young lady held on to Xian's sword and smiled. Your swordsmanship realm has broken through. Xian nodded. But it doesn't seem to work. The third young lady shook her head. No. As she spoke, she loosened 2 of her fingers. On her 2 fingers there were 2 traces of blood. The third young lady looked at Xian. If it was before, this sword of yours would not be a threat to me at all. But now your sword can hurt me. You should know that I have a God-state Taoist body. If it was someone else, this sword of yours would be enough to kill them. Xian was relieved. He almost forgot that the third young lady had a God-state Taoist body. He also had a Taoist body, so he knew how terrifying it was. The third young lady suddenly said, You are more like a swordsman now. Now your sword does not have so many external enhancements, so it is more pure. This is a good thing. Xian said in a low voice, How can this sword of mine be a threat to you? The third young lady looked at Xian. Your speed must be at least 5 times faster, and your strength must be at least 10 times stronger. Only then can you kill me with 1 strike. You cannot do without either. You have the speed but not the strength. My Taoist body can defend against this sword of yours. You have the strength but not the speed. I can escape before you strike, or I can strike first. Xian said softly, I understand. The third young lady said, Now you can use your external strength to enhance your swordsmanship. Xian shook his head, No need. Saying that, he suddenly took a step forward, and the sword domain enveloped the third young lady. The next moment, A ray of sword light flashed through the sword domain. The third young lady suddenly punched. Boom. As soon as she punched, the ray of sword light was stopped by her punch. Inside the ray of sword light was Yi Xian's sword. However, Yi Xian's sword stabbed into the third young lady's fist by half an inch. The third young lady suddenly withdrew her fist, but in the next moment she punched again. Boom. The ray of sword light shattered, and the moment it shattered, a sword silently arrived between the third young lady's eyebrows. However, the sword stopped half an inch away from her eyebrows, because the third young lady had unknowingly grabbed the sword in the ray of sword light. At this moment in the distance, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm. In an instant, countless rays of sword light crisscrossed and tore through the sword domain. Chi-chi-chi-chi. Tearing sounds resounded and it made one's scalp go numb. The third young lady slowly closed her eyes. When the sword chi arrived in front of her, she suddenly clenched her right hand, and a powerful fist force suddenly swept out from her body. Life fist. Without burning one's lifespan, it was just the fist force of life fist. However, this fist force directly crushed all of Yi Xian's sword chi. Not only that, but the sword domain was also trembling, and it was almost unable to withstand this force. However, there were several sword wounds all over her body. Yi Xian's sword could already break through her defense, but it was not enough because it was not fatal. The third young lady looked at Yi Xian, slowly loosened her right hand and then said, "Continue." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the supreme sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment he directly appeared in front of the third young lady, and suddenly pulled out the sword and slashed down. Sword drawing technique. As the sword slashed out, a powerful force swept down from the top of the third young lady's head. The third young lady suddenly clenched her right hand, and a powerful fist force surged out from her right hand. Boom. Yi Xian was directly shaken back. However, in the next moment Yi Xian rushed out again. In this way, in the following time, Yi Xian madly sparred with the third young lady every day, practicing the instant kill sword and the sword drawing technique. As for life fist, he could not practice it because to obtain the power of life he had to burn his lifespan and he really could not afford to practice it. Under the crazy practice, the power of Yi Xian's instant kill sword and the sword drawing technique also became stronger and stronger. This also made Yi Xian understand that there was no limit, only a higher limit. As for Xianxia, she was no longer in the Dao sect and she had come to an unknown starry sky. In her hand was the map that Yi Xian gave her. Looking for Miss Ding. Yi Xian knew that if he went to look for her, the mysterious woman would definitely know. Therefore he cultivated hard in the Dao sect to attract attention, and secretly asked Xianxia to look for Miss Ding. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.